Nine Souls is a 2024 action Metroidvania that deals with life, death, hopelessness, and revenge. Made by Taiwanese developer Red Candle Games in a departure from their previous style of narrative horror, Nine Souls was funded via Kickstarter and upon release was immediately welcomed by gamers with open arms. At the time of writing, it's got an overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam and sitting at an 83 on Metacritic. Nine Souls is a science fantasy game steeped in Taoism. In fact, the developers use the term Taopunk to describe the vibe of the world. For anyone unaware, Taoism is an ancient Chinese philosophical and religious tradition that focuses on harmonious existence in the world and a belief in the transformation process to an ultimately underlying reality, often known as becoming one with the Tao. Nine Souls plays with this concept as it builds the underlying narrative of the game and merges the existing beliefs of the religion with the motivations of the characters in the world. Nine Souls has you playing as Yi, a scientist belonging to a race of anthropomorphic cat beings known as Solarians, who is on a quest for revenge after being betrayed and left for dead 500 years before the events of the game. In the game's lore, we're on the island of Kunlun, which was turned into a space station and launched from the Solarians' home planet of Penglai. A disease known as the Tiandao ravages the Solarians, and with no cure to be found, the species is teetering on the edge of extinction. The renamed New Kunlun was launched from Penglai as part of a last-ditch attempt to find a cure for the virus. A pale blue planet far across the galaxy had been identified as a place where the cure could be worked on. As New Kunlun orbited the pale blue planet's sun to power itself with solar energy, primitive beings from the planet were brought to the island. And because New Kunlun was blocking the sun, the planet was cast into an ice age. The Solarians built holding areas for their captured primitives, making them look like lush forests and villages where they could live peacefully with no predators, risk of natural disaster, or scarcity of resources. One of these holding areas is known as Peach Blossom Village. Coined by their captors as Apeman, they lived in worship of the Solarians, not suspecting for one moment that Peach Blossom Village was anything other than their home. They had no reason to ever leave the village. All of their needs were met as long as they kept worshipping the Solarians. The Solarian Council running New Kunlun is a mix of elites, dignitaries, scientists, and warlords, all of whom wielded power in the shadows on Penglai. Science had long been a fringe concept on the Solarian homeworld, with most people believing in the Tao and the benevolence of the primordial roots Fusang, which was an endemic, mysterious force across the world, which we'll get into later. Those who believed in science rather than the Tao toiled away in obscurity and in secret, whilst the Tianhou ravaged the people. Most believed that the Tianhou would return them to the land peacefully, to travel the great Tao itself and become one with the universe again. Some were okay with this, others were scared by it. The scientists were determined to prove this wrong. Yi himself is a scientific prodigy who at a young age was brought to the council to develop the Eternal Cauldron Project, a way for Solarians to exist in virtual suspended animation, and to slow down the Tianhou virus enough to buy them time to find a cure. This technology became a core component of New Kunlun, with the Solarians, save for a handful of shift-working support staff, existing in virtual suspended animation as the island station travelled through a wormhole to the pale blue planet. Hidden from the eyes of the ape men, New Kunlun is home to a massive, elaborate complex that occupies the entire island. We'll be exploring factories, warehouses, research facilities, farms, and everything else the Solarian people could need for their long journey across the stars, as they live a virtual existence until a cure for the disease can be perfected. So with that grounding in the backstory, what actually is Nine Souls? Well, first, you'll likely have noticed from the footage I've been showing that it's absolutely fucking gorgeous. Red Candle Games have always had a keen eye for visual design, but the hand-animated artwork and stylized character design merge so well with the detailed and slick backgrounds. The Tao punk concept is evident in the visual design of the world. Yi's simple, almost traditional outfit clashes with the intricate mechanical science fiction design of the world. Taoism and cyberpunk visual elements bounce off each other both in harmony and dissonance, leaving a unique world for the player to explore. And if you're worried that Red Candle Games have strayed too far from the horror stylings of Detention and Devotion, you'll be pleased to know some really messed up shit and horrific moments as you progress through the game. Trust me. As a Metroidvania, Nine Souls doesn't do anything particularly new. You'll spend your time exploring several distinct areas, solving platforming puzzles, fighting mobs, unlocking paths or shortcuts between checkpoints, and fighting bosses. The world map is as expansive as it is detailed. It's absolutely massive, on par with the scale of Hallownest in Hollow Knight or the planet ZDR in Metroid Dread. The platforming itself is deeply satisfying. Yi is a delight to control. He moves quickly and responds to player inputs well. And in fact, when I went back to Hollow Knight after playing Nine Souls, the game I consider the gold standard for Metroidvanias, I was struck by how slow the Knight handles compared to Yi. There's a full suite of mobility tech on offer for ye: a double jump, air dash, a grapple hook, and even a dash with a generous amount of iframes. The game will force you to master all of his mobility tech and have you moving gracefully across some absolutely devious sections where you'll be managing not only platforming hazards, but flying enemies, snipers, and occasionally utterly ridiculous environmental hazards. Weirdly enough though, the game unlocks skills and abilities in the reversed order than most other Metroidvanias. For instance, you don't get your double jump until the very end of the game. It's combat abilities which are front-loaded into ye's toolkit, which makes sense because it's the combat where Nine Souls really shines. Most Metroidvanias crib from Dark Souls for their combat systems. You have a range of melee or ranged attacks and you engage directly with your enemies using your movement tech to increase your survivability. If you take too many hits and die, you respawn back at a checkpoint and have to do a corpse run to get your money or experience back. Nine Souls has some of these elements, but it mostly takes its inspiration from Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. If you haven't played it, first of all, how dare you? Go and play it. But if you haven't played it and want to keep watching, Sekiro was From Software playing around with the established mechanics of their Souls franchise. Rather than sword and board combat where you turtle up behind a shield and wait for an opening, Sekiro tasked the player with meeting threats head on and playing a defense first game. You use your sword to block and parry hits, avoiding damage till you either break your opponent's stance or you get an opening to deal some damage. This is what you do in Nine Souls. Yi is capable of deflecting hits from pretty much any attack that comes his way, no matter whether the size or power of the enemy. Each time you defend an attack, you'll charge up your talismans, magical attacks that you can then attach to an enemy to deal massive explosive damage. Defense is the name of the game in Nine Souls. You'll need to learn attack patterns, read the tells and telegraphs from each enemy, and execute your defense and offense appropriately. For most of the mobs you can brute force your way through, but you'll burn through your health and healing pipe really quickly. Every enemy is dangerous, even the most basic sword wielding enemies can take huge chunks of your health away from you. Nailing the blocks and parries is absolutely essential, because if you don't then you're going to suffer in the boss fights, and the bosses in Nine Souls are intimidating, frequently spectacular, and universally challenging. Whether it's a named Solarian boss or one of the mini-bosses you'll encounter during exploration, you need to pay close attention to them. There's not one boss in the game that I'd say is easy on a first playthrough. I mean, one mini-boss in the second main area had me stuck for over an hour on my first run. However, once you nail their moveset and execute a perfect fight, well, it's a thing of beauty. These encounters all become elegant, almost anime-style battles of cross swords, explosions, and airborne acrobatics. It's worth pointing out here that Nine Souls can be cripplingly difficult at times. There are at least 3 points in the game I can think of where the difficulty curve for the combat goes through the roof. You need your wits about you as you explore New Kunlun, and the main area bosses, the souls themselves, are not to be underestimated. But that difficulty is part of the charm, at least as far as I'm concerned. Because that difficulty is tuned to perfection, as you explore each area of the game, you'll find a roster of monsters and machines that gradually introduce themselves and progressively get more difficult to deal with, either in terms of the amount of damage they do or the situations you find them in. One sword-wielding soldier might be easy to deal with on his own, but how about when he's flanked with several other kinds of enemies attacking you all from different directions? The boss fights are also tough but fair in how they prepare and teach the player how to learn the fight. Pretty much every fight will result in you being killed pretty quickly on your first couple of attempts, but as you keep attempting each fight, you'll notice that you're gradually getting better and better at it each time. You start to internalize the boss's movesets without really knowing you're doing it, and you'll find yourself effortlessly handling combos or attacks that were initially killing you instantly. And for me, this is the perfect way to handle difficulty. A lot of the boss fights in this game demand mechanical perfection, and there isn't really much scope to fight the bosses your own way. You simply need to learn how to fight any given enemy. For some of the later bosses, you can spend hours learning them. You'll probably enter some kind of flow state when you're battling them without even thinking. The responses to some of the boss's attacks will just come naturally without any real need to think about what you're doing. It's marvellous. However, if you're struggling with the game and just cannot make progress, there is actually an easy mode. Nine Souls comes with a story mode option in the game menu that allows you to configure the difficulty however you'd like. You can set the amount of damage that Yi takes and the amount of damage he dishes out. You can make the game as hard or as easy as you like. You can drop down from normal mode to story mode at any point in the game, but you can't go back. Now I'll put my hands up and say that I initially used story mode to get through the final boss, although I have since been back and beaten it on normal difficulty. Trust me, when you see the state of that fight you'll understand why. My point is, don't be put off by the difficulty of the game. The story is worth experiencing and you can customize the combat to your particular skill level. Now speaking of the story, this is your warning. I'm going to be spoiling everything. Everything in Nine Souls, including both possible endings. You've already seen how long this video is, so trust me, I'm going into extreme detail here. Everything is laid out in chapters so you can skip back and forth as you need. I've also uploaded all of my footage of the game to my second channel, Gadget on Gaming Footage. If you're making a project around 9 Sols, you're free to use my footage as long as you drop a little credit for me in your video description. The link to the second channel is in the description below. Also, this game was made in Taiwan, and all the characters and a lot of the concepts in the game have Chinese names, spellings and pronunciation. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and apologise in advance for butchering the hell out of them. I'm just a simple man from the north of England, I've got no chance with some of these names, but I'll do my best. The game opens with Yi hanging from a cliff. He's severely injured and someone in a veil stands above him, holding a sword to his face. She says something to him that we can't hear, and then he falls from the cliff. We see his body lying dead on the ground. There's no life in him at all. Tendril-like roots spread out to his body, dragging him inside a rock formation and enveloping him. The roots cross our vision and everything fades away. Yi is brought back to consciousness when he hears the sound of a familiar flute melody someone very special would play for him. We see her in the darkness, strange flowers growing around her until she fades out and we see a young human boy named Xuan Xuan who is actually the one playing. We then see Yi, still cradled by the roots, his wounds repaired, as the boy looks on at him. Yi opens his eyes for the first time in hundreds of years. The boy takes Yi in and nurses him back to health in his primitive village. Every year the gods that the villagers worship bless them with a bountiful harvest, and several of the residents ascend to live among the gods. As the game begins, Xuan Xuan is making preparations to ascend. He has been chosen and he's very excited, for he gets to see his mother and father again who had ascended years earlier. But Yi is trying his best to dissuade him from this. The village is excited too. Peach Blossom Village is decorated for a huge harvest party, with the residents wearing masks representing some of their benevolent gods. Effigies are built to the Solarians, and the town shaman recounts exciting legends about their pantheon of gods. Everyone is excited, save for Yi, and actually one of the humans, called Shenong, who doesn't buy the whole Solarian thing. At the ceremonial altar, Yi arrives just as the first villager ascends and... oh. Oh no. Oh, wait, don't go in there. Well.
Bi Sun, K 灵と善
Ah, now it's Shanshan's turn. Fuck it, we can't let him be killed. Yi saves his life, stops the ceremony, and reveals himself to the villagers as a Solarian. They immediately prostrate for him and he has no time for questions.
李尊
He heads to the ceremonial platform and hacks it, allowing him access to the harvesting facility below the village. The alarms are blaring and it's time for Yi to set his plan in motion and fuck up the other souls on the council. The facility acts as a secondary tutorial. We had our basic movement and combat tutorial before we reached Peach Blossom Village, so now it's time to really learn what to do. We find our first checkpoint and commune with the primordial roots Fusa. Think bonfires, but creepier looking. As we progress, we find out what happens to the bodies of the Apemen when they're harvested. We find a body bag and take a bloody crimson hibiscus flower from it. At the very start of the game, in the original movement tutorial, we retrieve a crimson hibiscus flower for Shanshan to wear as part of the Ascension ceremony. But in this bag of gore and viscera, we find one of these flowers. They, along with the bodies of the harvested, are simply discarded and left to rot. The brains are what the souls are interested in, not the bodies, but we'll get into that later. Throughout the facility, we can see in the background the harvested bodies being dismembered and processed, and it's actually quite unsettling. We move through the facility meeting different kinds of clone guards and we get taught about our next combat technique, unblockable crimson attacks. These attacks will hit you no matter what, so you need to mitigate them. In the early game you'll need to dodge through them or away from them, otherwise you're going to take a massive amount of damage. Pretty shortly into the game we're going to get an ability to counter some of them. Some of the crimson attacks come with a green glow around the enemy, which indicates they can be knocked out of the attack. Doing this involves jumping and hitting the block button, causing Yi to break them out of their movement with a Tai Chi kick. This will give us a moment of respite to either heal or better yet slap a talisman on them and do some big damage. But we get this skill a little bit later, so for now we have to dodge. As we get deeper into the facility we see computer screens with alerts on it showing intruders in the facility. There are two screens, one with Yi's information and the other showing Shenong. It appears he's escaped the village after us and is now exploring the facility on his own. Abacus calls us and chides us for saving Shanshan. Wasn't part of the plan after all, but Yi is in charge here and he has his reasons for everything he does. The area boss for the Apeman facility is an elite clone soldier called Red Tiger Elite Eigong. I hope you're paying attention in all the combat tutorials because here's your first test. Thankfully the boss design is actually quite kind to the player, he looks worse than he actually is. He only has three main attacks. An overhand triple slash combo, an uppercut that leads into an overhead smash, and a crimson leaping slam that he can sometimes combo into an uppercut. If you've paid attention, he'll go down quickly and you'll get your first jade, the stasis jade. I'll talk about these in a bit. With Baichang dealt with, Yi ascends an elevator to the central hub area of New Kunlun. There's plenty to explore in this area, including a rather dramatic room where you see the primordial roots Fusang in all its glory. Abacus tells us that it has continued to grow in the last 500 years and it has adapted well to whatever Yi had built before New Kunlun was launched. This is where we get our mission for the game, as Yi tells Abacus he needs to reach the council code at the root pinnacle, the top of the roots, so he can take control of New Kunlun, establish order and punish the other souls. To do this we need to take the soul seals from the other 9 Solarians. Think of them like keycards to activate the facility. Easy, right? Maybe not. This is of course where we go for the end of the game, but we've got a lot of work to do before then. We come to a massive door with 2 statues leading to an old disused place that is peaceful. Nothing appears to have been here for a long time. When we reach the end of the area, we walk past a massive structure that looks like a brain, but nothing happens with it. We need to go a little further and reach a room that allows us to charge up and repair the Mystic Nymph. This little gadget is one of Yi's prized possessions and possibly his greatest invention before he conceived of the Eternal Cauldron. It holds an emotional significance for him, which we'll get into later, but practically it's very useful. The Mystic Nymph can be used like a drone to remotely interface with computers or hack terminal points. Progression through some areas of the game will be reliant on the Nymph. It's also used to solve a few puzzles later in the game, so get used to using it. With the Nymph powered up, we can reactivate Abacus, our trusty AI companion. Abacus, or Ryui as he's sometimes called, tells us that after Yi disappeared he was heavily restricted by the souls, but he's too critical to the functions of New Kunlun to be shut down properly. He locked down this area and hid it from the security system, so when the time came he could provide a safe respite for Yi. He then scans Yi and determines that our Jade system is heavily damaged, which he can fix in what he calls a painful procedure. The Jade system is akin to Hollow Knight's badge system. As you progress through the game, you'll find Jades that will allow you to build Yi to suit your playstyle. At the start of the game, you'll have 2 computational nodes or 2 badge slots, and each Jade has a node cost, so finding or buying new ones from the 3D printer should be a priority. From Bai Chang we received our first Jade, which freezes some enemies, though not usually boss enemies, when you slap a talisman on them. Other Jades include one that can steal life from enemies when using talismans or certain combat moves, damage boosts at the cost of taking more damage, and the one I used for most of the run when I found it, the second chance Jade that gives you 25% of your health back when your HP hits 0. That one's very useful. Abacus reactivates the Four Seasons Pavilion, this area that we're in, and this will act as our home base for the duration of the game. This is our area of respite from the dangers of New Kunlun, and several NPCs will join us over the course of the game. Starting with Xuan, who has escaped from Peach Blossom Village with the help of Shenong and made his way here. He's furious with Yi for lying, disappearing, and preventing him from ascending to live with the gods. Yi demands that he returns to the village, pointing out that it's not safe, but Xuan isn't going anywhere. He's adamant that he'd rather be with Yi than back at the village with the other humans. Yi eventually relents as long as the boy doesn't leave the pavilion, and so he becomes a permanent fixture for the rest of the game. In the centre of the pavilion we see a special root node has been activated. This is the master node, the central one in the whole game. When Yi rests at it, roots rise up and wrap around him, taking him to a shadow realm, closer to the Tao. This is a place where we meet with a mysterious older Solarian identified as Leah, who is levitating gently above the ground. He speaks in riddles and half-truths to Yi, much to our protagonist's annoyance. And this is the first of many times we're going to be talking with this character, so I'll go into his story properly later, but keep him in mind, he's important. Aside from riddles about the Tao, Leah gives us the Fusang Horn. This allows Yi to teleport between the master node and the last root node rested at. In practice it means wherever you are you can rest and teleport back to the pavilion, and then head right back to where you started, which is useful. He's a good lad, his old floaty. But now we have business to attend to. We are given the locations of the first 2 souls on our hit list, Kuafu and Gaomang. We can do these in whichever order we wish. Kuafu is a technologist who resides in the power reservoir deep within New Kunlun superstructure, whilst Gaomang is in charge of the farms to the eastern side of the map. In this playthrough I went after Kuafu first, but you can do them in either order. When Yi enters the area, we are accosted by Kuafu via comms, who warns us that the defences have been activated. He's holed up in his sanctum and determined not to let us get to him. He doesn't believe that Yi is alive, no matter how much we tell him otherwise, and he's convinced that we are an imposter, so we'll have to see to that. As we cross on a platform to the central area of the power reservoir, we get our first call from Heng. Heng is Yi's little sister, and she'll be talking to us throughout this journey. She was the person that Yi thought he saw playing the flute in the opening cutscene before he realised it was Xuan. We see the pair of them as children, riding on a similar looking transport back on Penglai. And aren't they just fucking adorable? It's these scenes between Heng and Yi which really show off how beautiful his art style is. They travel across what looks like an abandoned city as Heng talks about wanting to play in the towers. Yi corrects her and tells her they're not buildings to play in, but they're rhizomatic columns from a time called the Turbulent Era that acted like huge batteries, storing power to be used across Penglai. We learn a few things about the Turbulent Era in this conversation, mostly that it was a time of great technical advancement and of scientific miracles. It appears that war raged across Penglai at some point, and it left technology from the Turbulent Era to rot, forgotten and forbidden by the Solarians who survived. Now they're considered weapons of war, never to be used again. Yi chides Heng for not paying attention in school, where she would normally have learned about these towers and rhizomatic energy, but Heng tells him that her studies bore her and she would much rather learn from Yi. This conversation gives us an early look at Yi and Heng's relationship dynamic. She adores her older brother, she hangs on his every word. Yi, by comparison, is a serious kid, focused on his studies and science to the point where he can be quite rude to Heng and dismissive of her more aloof and creative tendencies. When the call ends, Yi has a moment of silence to himself before he moves on to the reservoir. We work our way through the power reservoir until we reach a giant pyramid. This is where Coafu is holed up, but the power to the bridge is off, so we need to keep exploring. As we venture further, we encounter a strange one-eyed creature. This is Chiyu, a former battle monster who Yi is very surprised to learn has not only gained self-awareness, but has a rather peaceful and serene personality. Chiyu acts as a wandering merchant, selling some rather important items, including jades and poisons, which will become important much later on. Chiyu will pop up in a few places throughout the game, usually right before tough boss fights, before finding his way to the Four Seasons Pavilion where he'll become a permanent fixture. Once we activate the bridge to the pyramid, we make our way in, and Coafu, still convinced that we're not the real Yi, activates the final stage of his security system and our first major boss, Yingzhao. This guy looks cool as fuck, don't you think? He's a biomechanical hybrid centaur thing, and the perfect tool to practice our moves. At first he's intimidating, and you'll probably die a few times to him, but pay attention, and he only really has 4 moves to deal with. He has an overhead slam, a slicing uppercut with his spear, a charge, and then in his second phase he adds an airborne power bomb and a deflectable red version of his charge attack. And that's pretty much it. It's actually possible to beat this boss without moving at all. All of his attacks are parryable and dodging isn't really required when you know how to handle him. But he's really cool. Once he's down, we can progress to Yi and Coafu's reunion. Yi walks into a darkened room that looks a complete mess. Parts of machines and computers strewn all over the place. Kind of like my office. A shadowy figure sits on a floating chair and still doesn't recognise him until he leans into the light and realises that it really is Yi standing in front of him. Coafu was one of Yi's closest friends, and when he realises that Yi is actually alive, he's overcome with emotion. Just look at those giant eyes and his tears, bless him. But Yi isn't immediately trusting. He wants proof that Coafu isn't in league with the other souls before he'll go any further. Coafu, full of regret, explains he didn't expect the other souls to kill Yi. He thought they were going to chase him down and bring him back so they could all talk as a council. Instead, Yi was murdered and thrown from a cliff. Coafu is adamant he wasn't involved with the plot against Yi, but he feels guilty due to his own inaction allowing the other 8 souls to kill his friend. Much to Coafu's surprise, Yi forgives him, believing that Coafu had nothing to do with the plot. Yi explains he needs all the soul seals and he wants Coafu's help in retrieving them. In his naivety, Coafu wonders if there's still scope for negotiation with the other souls, which of course there isn't. After an invite back to the pavilion, Coafu leaves Yi to retrieve a soul seal, and we get some history on Coafu's involvement with the council in the form of memory shards from his vital sanctum. Man, there really are a lot of proper nouns in this game. In the memories, we see that Kwafu left his small hometown to find a way to help them, where as a young Solarian he meets Yi. The two become fast friends and draw a close bond with their engineering prowess. Kwafu is praised by the council leaders as a student by providing technological advances that move their cause forward significantly, and eventually earns himself and Yi invitations to join the council. In the last memory shard, we see Kwafu and Yi in front of one of the rhizomatic towers with the line, quote, "I'll follow you till that day comes," unquote, referencing the day peace could return. The duo being focused on improving the lives of the Solarians on Penglai and using their scientific and engineering skills to make the world better. I suspect this is before the Tianho really takes hold, their idealism as young superstars on the council giving them grand ideas before a horrible disease transforms the directions of their lives. And with that, we have our first soul seal, which translates as Ding, meaning loyalty. It's cute. When we return to the pavilion, we speak to Kwafu and he's incensed. He's furious. Kwafu is absolutely disgusted that we'd let an Apeman into the pavilion, let alone be consorting with one of our own free will. He tells us that Xuan keeps calling for us and asks if we're actually going to raise the little beast. Honestly, it's not a good look for him. If he just got to know Xuan, he'd realise how lovely the lad actually is. Regardless, Kwafu has a gift for us, the Azure Bow, an heirloom from Yi's family. This bow now gives us a ranged option during combat. There's 3 possible arrowheads we can use for it. For now we have the basic Cloud Piercer, which fires in a straight line but can stagger enemies from a distance and can even go through several of them at once. That's going to prove very helpful later on. From here on, Kwafu will act as our tech genius, upgrading our bow and other gear as we need it. For money, naturally, but upgrades nonetheless. So with the first soul seal under our belt, it's time to head back out and claim another. This time we're heading to the farms as we hunt Gao Mang. Before we reach the greenhouse in Gao Mang's domain, we need to head through the ruins of Lake Yaochi. Unlike most of New Kunlun, this place looks and feels particularly ancient. There's a decrepitness to the area that stands in stark contrast to where we've been so far. We reach a room filled with 5 bells. We meet a strange young Solarian. He won't tell us his name and he speaks in riddles. Yi tries to intimidate him into answering his questions, but he's very confident that he's not going to do anything. He claims to understand divination and isn't really listening to Yi at any point in the conversation. He mentions the Daybreak Tower, which is the area directly above us that we can't reach right now. It sits above the ruins and we'll go explore it towards the end of the game, but he does drop some lore about the location. The Daybreak Tower was once a place where the ancient rulers of Penglai would pray for fortunes for their various kingdoms, whether it was peace for their people, the strength to destroy their enemies, or for a strong bloodline to maintain their empires. The Daybreak Tower was a holy site for all Solarian cultures. This was, of course, well before Yi's time, where belief and piety was considered more important than scientific discovery. He tells us of the music the bells would make and would gather Solarians to the tower in worship, implying he's potentially thousands of years old, if not older. He gives us a gift, some ancient sheet music that Yi doesn't know how to read properly, but it's something we can give to Xuan. Throughout our adventure, we'll find key items that we can gift to the boy as part of his story. This sheet music will be important for our progression, so we'll keep it in mind for now. Once we've been suitably creeped out by this mysterious stranger, we can progress through the rest of the ruins, including a ride on some sea monster boat that becomes an on-rails combat arena. Because of course. As we reach the end of the area, we get another call from Heng. Wherever she is, she clearly misses Yi. She talks about her lonely life when Yi wasn't around, how she didn't have friends, but how she found comfort in nature instead. We found out here that Heng could hear the primordial roots Fusang singing to her. Yi was skeptical of the idea of the roots singing to her and didn't believe that they had any sentience, but Heng was adamant that she could hear them and they sang a beautiful song for her. She changes the subject, instead talking about the light of stars being echoes of the past, the light of ancient stars feeding the roots, which in turn provide the people of Penglai with power. But Heng knows something her teacher can't tell her. The souls and dreams of Solarians also return to the roots and feed them. The songs she can hear are the roots feeding on the souls of the recently deceased and on the dreams of those sleeping through the night. These souls and dreams become stories that the roots sing across the universe. Of course, Yi wasn't buying any of this, preferring to try and explain away her whimsy with science and facts. Heng tried to avoid talking to the roots again after that, but she could always hear their song. Even as time passed, she could always hear them and always speak to them. And if you're thinking that Yi was a bit of a twat to his little sister, you would not be wrong. Yi eventually reaches a golden lift which looks to be our way into the greenhouse, only for Gao Mang to make herself known. This genetically modified bastard traps us in a lift and starts to taunt Yi like all good sociopaths love to. Gao Mang is confident in herself and her abilities, mocking Yi for turning up to her territory alone before summoning her children, 2 Jiangshi soldiers created from the bodies of ape men who are thralls to her will. Gao Mang was involved in the initial trapping of the ape men from the pale blue planet, and like the other souls, she sees them as little more than cattle, even point blank saying that they can be quite cute once tamed. She asks them to bring Yi down with all of their might, which they take to mean smash the fucking lift to bits. I suppose better lost than dead, I suppose. When we're back on our feet again, a root node will take us to the spirit realm once again and we'll get a new ability, Charge Strike. This lets Yi break through weak walls and deal with shielded enemies. It's a very useful ability. I found in combat it could be a little tricky to pull off due to how long it takes to charge up. The greenhouse is where the food supply for New Kunlun comes from. Gao Mang, in her infinite wisdom, has spent the last 5 centuries trying to mutate and genetically engineer the crops to provide higher and higher yields for less and less energy, which in itself is not a bad idea. But the yellow pools and waterfalls throughout this area are toxic as hell and will damage Yi unless he dashes through them. It's also resulted in the creation of some of the monsters that have found their way across New Kunlun, because genetic engineering never has side effects, does it? Through our explorations we'll find an unknown seed, another gift we can give to Xuan. He's not had good luck cultivating plants and crops before, so he's determined to keep this one alive, but Yi becomes hesitant. After all, with all the genetic prodding and poking that Gao Mang has been doing to the flora and fauna of the farms, the seed could be anything. Xuan, as usual, manages to convince Yi to his way of thinking, and they plant it in the soil in the pavilion. When we return to the greenhouse, we have another combat boat ride before we finally reach Gao Mang's sanctum and we get her villain monologue. She starts trying to justify her experiments in genetic engineering using the example of the octoberry she's eating. Explained that if it weren't for Solarian meddling, the species would have went extinct hundreds of generations ago. In her mind, that's no different to screwing around with the ape men or with the Solarians themselves. She's very much an ends justify the means kind of gal. But when she says, quote, sacrificing a little freedom and yielding to your superiors is the path to a perfect society, end quote, we get the full scope of her eugenicist worldview. Inferior must live in thrall to the superior. The peasants must serve the elite. She's the kind of person the French designed the guillotine for. And now we get to the boss fight that almost put me off this game entirely. No, seriously. For this fight you're locked in combat with the 2 Jiangshi warriors that we saw before. One large and slow, one small and fast. The goal of the fight is to kill one or both of the warriors and have Gao Mang fly above them and resurrect them, giving you an opportunity to deal some damage to her, and I've got to say, I thought this fight fucking sucked. The Jiangshi warriors make this fight intolerable for me because they constantly cross over each other with attacks. The key to a good dual boss fight is their timing and the way they use the space of the arena. Think of the way that Ornstein and Smoke complement each other in Dark Souls. The large Jiangshi has 2 main attacks. He can set his arms alight and leap forward 3 times, leaving damaging fire on the floor, and then he can wind up a huge sweeping attack that can break your stance and knock you out of whatever you're trying to do. The small one has projectiles he can throw and has a couple of close range combos that always seem to include one more attack than you'd expect, with a delayed hit. What I found so bad about this fight is their attacks cross over each other. Given the main mechanic in the game is deflection and defense, reading their tells and moves becomes now an impossible when their character models stand across each other. Added to that, making space doesn't necessarily work either, as both of them bafflingly have the ability to move across the arena really quickly. The big one can leap huge chunks of the room and the small one is just naturally fast. And when you have one KO'd, you only have around 20 seconds before Gao Mang gets him back in the fight, so you have to have one knockdown, and if you're managing fighting the other one you can lose your opportunity to damage her. I genuinely hated this fight. I almost gave up on the game at this point. However, after hours of attempts, I managed to beat them and take down Gao Mang. Defeating her gives us a hell of an insight into Yi's state of mind. Unlike the souls to come, Yi doesn't kill her. No, he has a much worse punishment in store for her. He takes one of the slave collars she uses to control the Jiangshi warriors and places it on her head, leaving her locked in a waking unconsciousness, a slave without a master, to sit there unable to do anything for the rest of time with her two Jiangshi slaves begging her for instructions on what to do. It's really fucked up. Like, I was actually shocked by it. I'd have preferred it if he just killed her. We head to her control room and take her soul seal, and we see the memories of her early life. Gao Mang was homeless as a child, abandoned and hungry, but she had brilliant ideas on cultivating crops and genetic engineering. This is what brought her to the attention of the leader of the council, Eigong, who encouraged Gao Mang to join with her. As time went on and she enslaved humans to work in the greenhouse, she gained affection for two young children, telling them she would let them live longer than the others if they worked hard. This is what led to the two Jiangshi warriors we just fought. She transformed the two children as they grew up so they would always be by her side. Ultimately, she wanted to make sure the Solarians and all of Penglai didn't go hungry like she'd been as a child. In her mind, the fucked up way she enslaved humans was justified because she could feed the Solarians. Her soul seal is the character Ye, which ironically means equality. I did not feel good after this fight. When we head back to the pavilion, Xuan Xuan will give us a performance of the music we gave him. While we've been away, he and Abacus have translated the ancient Solarian sheet music and he plays the melody for us. Beautiful, isn't it? The melody also acts as the solution to the puzzle in the bell room that we met that mysterious Solarian in, so I guess he's helping us. At one point around this time, when we come back to the pavilion, we find Shenong, one of the ape men who escaped Peach Blossom Village and found his way through the harvesting facility, lying on the floor convulsing. Xuan Xuan dragged him in after finding him collapsed by the entrance, and he asks us for some poison. Yeah, apparently poison heals him. He's a weird guy. When we talk to him, we find out he's a skeptic. He never believed in the Solarians and he was convinced that Peach Blossom Village was never all it seemed to be. He doesn't really trust Yi at first, referring to him as a white-haired monster. Though based on what we just did to Gao Mang, I can't say I disagree with him. Shenong is our way of increasing our health. All we have to do is feed him 2 pieces of poison, which he can then use to brew some potent drinks that he shares with Yi. I have no idea how fermented poison increases one health, but who am I to speculate on Solarian biology? At the very least, Yi has found a drinking buddy. Right, enough dawdling, we've got more revenge to dish out. We're off to the factory now to find our way to the warehouse and to Yan Lao. Our next cell is all the way on the western side of the map, and to get to him we have to travel through the factory. We'll talk about the factory proper later in the video, as it's the home of another soul we'll need to beat later on. However, on our way to the factory we have to travel through Central Cortex, giving us a rather weird little jump scare moment. We come to a room with a large machine which seems to interfere with our vision. And when we try and leave the room, we loop around the other side before blood starts to rain down and our vision closes in, and then... Yikes. Anyway, between the factory and the warehouse facility we get drawn into the roots again and we're given the air dash ability, which is handy because the warehouse is all about platforming puzzles. We'll be making use of the air dash and the Mystic Nymph in a collection of traversal challenges that demand precision and spatial awareness. Once we hack the power on at the warehouse, the fun can begin. Yan Lao is the administrator's administrator. He's a fastidious archiver of anything and everything he can find from Penglai or related to Solarian culture. He initially wants to talk with Yi rather than resorting to violence. He understands Yi's anger at Eigong's betrayal and wants to caution him that pursuing revenge will only end up in Yi's death. Of course, Yi doesn't want to entertain this idea. He's furious and vengeance shall be his. Once Yi has threatened the hell out of Yan Lao and we've worked our way through some devious platforming puzzles, we need to get further into the facility. And what better way to do that than taking a break in one of the crates and letting the logistics infrastructure do all the work? As we travel, we receive another call from Heng. She talks about the last store in the village closing down, and then reminisces about their childhood again, where the two children would hide out in large pickling jars in the house. Yi would hide in them so he could read scientific textbooks in secret without his devoutly pious parents noticing. We learn that Yi is single-minded and trying to excel, partly for his own aspirations, but partly to prove how wrong his parents' faith is. He believes that they only see the world through their prejudices, which is why they believe science to be evil. Heng has been using these jars in the years to pickle vegetables so she'll have food to eat in the spring, even though she's not sure she'll ever get to taste them. Now that we've reached the inner warehouse, we can hunt down Yan Lao proper. We have to power up a lift leading us towards Yan Lao's sanctum, so it's back to devious platforming puzzles to reach the switches. After descending the lift, we'll finally come face to face with Yan Lao himself. He starts to monologue to Yi while tapping away at a console. He prides himself on his manners as he lectures Yi, periodically checking a progress bar on his console. His ethos is that Yi should be respecting his elders, essentially saying, listen to me, you little shit. But in a much more condescending way, if that's at all possible. He tells the story of his father bringing a record for him to listen to, only to trip whilst clinging onto it. After expressing relief that the record wasn't damaged, Yan Lao realised... Well, he didn't realise anything actually, he's bullshitting Yi to kill time until the progress bar completes. The crafty bastard has awakened an ancient weapon, and it's only Chi's brother Jingtian. He's an angry axe-wielding weapon of war that can cover the small arena and electric damage areas. He's an absolute bastard. The key to managing this fight is space. Unlike most boss fights, your arena is a tight space, meaning that he's only ever a couple of steps behind you. The other thing to bear in mind is this fight is a DPS race. Every time Jingtian goes down on his knees, he starts to heal himself, so you need to out-damage his healing. I'd recommend saving your arrows for when he starts to heal, as they can knock him out of the animation, or slap a talisman on him for good measure. Because of his healing, this could be a weirdly long fight that can absolutely sap your concentration and mental stamina. Once he's down and you've caught your breath, you can get a little lore about the Battle Lords. We learn of a new faction, the G Kingdom, who created the Battle Lords with state-of-the-art transmutation technology to combine Solarians with animal genetics and metal skeletons to create these mindless war machines. They did often go berserk though. They weren't very effective as a military force, and the project was terminated following a ceasefire that ended the turbulent era. Before we can go much further, we run into that mysterious Solarian that we met at Lake Yaochi. He tells us a little about the warehouse, which he calls the Boundless Repository, a place that catalogues all Solarian history and heritage, containing relics and icons from across all ages of Penglai. He's come down here to witness the relics before Yi kills Yan Lao and stops the repository's functions. He asks Yi if he's read something called The Parting Missive, a book that Yi was forced to memorize in school, written by a warlord called Jitong, the last king of Ji. He tells us that Jitong tried to unite the kingdoms of Penglai by force, only to be defeated by our floating friend Leah and his Fangxi guild. Jitong wrote The Parting Missive as he was about to be deposed. He wrote it in the final minutes of his life, etching his sorrow and rage onto the page. He's using this as an example of why he doesn't believe that antiques should be preserved, that emotion and power can now only be observed, never recreated or emulated effectively. Naturally, Yi finds this cryptic lore dropping to be frustrating and he doesn't appreciate what he's getting at. Now, on to Yan Lao. We follow him into the depths of the boundless repository, but he's watching us via cameras and he's nervous. He knows we're coming to kill him. He's also pissed off that we killed Jingtian, one of his antiques destroyed and lost to time. As a last-ditch attempt to save his life, he activates a new weapon, one that's going to target Yi from a distance. Cue the big chase sequence. This is our boss who's going to target us and open fire if we stay still too long. We have to run as fast as possible and stay moving at all times, otherwise we're going to get shot and this thing hits us hard. Occasionally we have to stop and let it fire at us to clear an obstacle, but for the most part we're supposed to run as fast as we can through tight, devilishly difficult platforming sequences while staying ahead of a reticule that tracks you and handling traps in combat. It's stressful but also surprisingly fun, weirdly. Once we get through the gauntlet, it's time to take down Yan Lao and his death machine. He activates a device that's been offline for nearly a millennia. As he coughs, his diseased body getting closer to death. The Tiandao comes closer to taking him as the device becomes active, his eyes bleeding and his body failing. He takes control of the Skyrending Claw just in time for Yi to arrive. This mechanical monstrosity floats above the arena and will repeatedly try to crush Yi, either by slamming down from above or spinning its arms and sliding across the arena. It can deploy lasers that divide the space you fight in and has a crimson attack that will try to grab Yi and deliver massive damage. Its signature attack, though, has it targeting Yi with artillery. You've got to climb up the walls and dash across the boss so it blindly shoots itself. Like all the Soul bosses, it has a second phase to deal with, and it doesn't gain any new attacks, just everything gets a little bit faster. Honestly, this is far from the hardest boss in the game, but it's fast and impactful. It's actually a joy to fight. Eventually though, the claw goes down, and with a quick hack it blasts through the wall of the arena with its laser, giving Yi access to the control room and destroying Yan Lao's control pod. As we walk in, we see Yan Lao's last moments as he coughs. He says he doesn't want to die, before collapsing on the floor. The Tiandao bursts from him, growing into a Tao fruit, as happens to all Solarians when they die from the disease. When we take his soul seal, we see Yan Lao as a child being chided by an elder as he meticulously archives ancient treasures from Penglai. It seems at some point he resented the job, thinking that no one cared about the treasures he was protecting, until Eigong became involved and praised him for retaining such a complete history of Solarian knowledge in his archive. It's only then he realises the riches that he's been hoarding and their value to him personally. His last memory shard is the realisation that everything has a purpose eventually, as he shows an ancient artefact at a Solarian museum. His greed and hoarding finally pays off for him. His soul seal is the character Jia, which signifies legacy. Before we can leave the repository, we get a call from someone new, Ji Quan, on Next Soul, a man of laughter and madness that is calling to challenge Yi. He gives Yi a good negging, claiming that we're struggling and that Yan Lao and Gao Mang weren't real challengers, and that he's worried that we've gotten too rusty after 5 centuries of rest. He wants a friendly duel with Yi. As friendly a duel you can have with a psychotic warlord who's constantly fucking around with transmutation technology, but that's just splitting hairs. Jiquan does promise to disable all the traps, which of course means that this is a trap. The most obvious glaring trap, a trap you can see from space. Jiquan is waiting at the factory, so let's head straight there to deal with him once and for all. Well, that's the intention anyway. We meet him sat by two imposing statues with hammers, the devices that create the big damaging plasma blast that fills some of the room in the factory. We'll deal with that later. Put a pin in it. He's joyful at the sight of Yi, half expecting that we'd have been scared off by him, but Yi is undeterred and he's ready to fight. We're going to fight as hard as we can. Shit. Okay, he's much stronger than us. Much stronger. Heng calls again. She tells Yi of the old photograph she's found, noticing that as Yi got older and things became more tense with their parents, there were fewer and fewer family photos taken. We then flash back to Heng and Yi leaning over something he's working on, the primordial roots wrapped around a machine in the background. Yi lets out some technobabble about what he's doing, essentially trying to harness the limitless power in a device he can build. Though he calls it the Azure Flyer, this is the creation of the mystic nymph. He taps some wires together and behind them the shape of the nymph comes into view. Yi has channeled the rhizomatic energy from the roots and it's gathering in this device. Heng knows it as the Qi, but Yi isn't having it. This is a place of science, not religion. Yi is full of pomposity as he points out that what he's doing hasn't even been proven to work, that a scholar proposed the idea and he's going to be the first to prove it. The scholar, of course, is Eigong. Yi is putting her research into practice in the hope of impressing her at a science fair she'll be visiting in their village. Heng is more concerned with what the nymph looks like, whether it's a moth or a dragonfly, pushing Yi to consider that form is just as important as function. Yi concedes he can make it into a butterfly, Heng's favourite insect, on the condition that she becomes his assistant in developing the technology. We fade out on them working on the nymph and we fade into Yi being tortured by Jiquan. And the lunatic is taking great joy in torturing Yi, zapping him over and over again with electricity while taunting him. The days wear on and the torture continues. Jiquan tells us that Eigong can't be reached, so the council meeting has been suspended, much to Jiquan's happiness as he can continue to torture Yi for even longer. He's even taken the time to stroll around the Apeman pens, revealing himself to the primitive humans and taking great joy in their terror at seeing him. The pen in question is Peach Blossom Village, and Jiquan knows that Shenong and Xuanxuan aren't in the village, eliciting a response from Yi at last. Jiquan wants to harvest all of the humans as soon as possible. When Yi is alone, strapped to the machine, the mystic nymph activates and overloads the torture rack, dropping Yi to the floor. Abacus tries to get in contact with us, but the signal is being interfered with. We're on our own, we're weak, and we're trapped in prison. It's time for a jailbreak. Now I know, we all hate forced stealth sections. We're still all traumatized by that Spider-Man game on the PlayStation 4, but fret not, dear viewer, this is a good one. Several days worth of torture has left Yi weak. Without his healing pipe or the ability to dash, we have to stick to the shadows and avoid the jailers, otherwise we are fucked. The prison is old and dilapidated. As we explore some of the cells, we find notes left behind by long-dead prisoners. One is a begging letter from a lad called Kang Hui to his father-in-law in the Ji Kingdom, desperately seeking his help after having offended the Feng clan. I assume the father-in-law left him to die here for his idiocy. The key to getting through this area is to hide. There are pots around the prison where Yi can secrete himself away and wait for the horribly mutated sword-wielding monstrosities that are the jailers to walk past. Until we can find a root node, we have no chance of defeating these guys. We also have to dodge floating security cameras, soldiers, and those weird mutated dogs that Jiquan is so fond of. I actually unironically love this section, it's so tense. It's also mercifully quite short. Once we reach a root node, Yi gets his full health, movement and abilities back. Now that we can move around properly, we can fight the jailers who, I can confirm, are dicks. They hit hard and have a big shield that they can throw and have returned to them. They also collapse into a pile of meat rather than disappear like most enemies. Foreshadowing is a literary device. We find another note from a prisoner, or it could potentially be from Kang Hui. This one isn't a letter but a scroll with someone begging for help, referring to a lunatic who wants to cut the writer's flesh off. Jiquan? Definitely Jiquan. After unlocking a shortcut back to the root node, we meet the area boss, the guard dog Kang Hui. Wait a minute, that name is familiar. Yes, that poor idiot who upset the Feng clan and was writing to his father-in-law has been transmuted into this horrendous beast. He has become an enormous, held blindfolded in some kind of stocks with a device holding his mouth open. He looks to be stuck in eternal suffering. Killing this boss is going to be a kindness. The device in his mouth constantly spawns out these meatballs, I guess, that morph into enemies and variants of enemies we've met before. Some fly and attack from range, others on the mutated guard dogs, and in the second phase he starts spawning those fucking jailers, who keep regenerating from their meat puddle when you kill them. The key to this fight is not to be overwhelmed. Most of the enemies you deal with can be held at bay with talismans and your arrows. You need to keep hitting Kang Hui's head to do damage to him until 2 pumps on either side of him open up. They're filling with transmutation fluid and they both need to be hacked to finally kill him. Until both of these pumps are hacked, he'll return to full health whenever you get him down to halfway. When you're in these phase breaks, he begs you for death. Periodically, Kang Hui will trigger a huge meat spike that can help you by clearing the field completely. When you finally break both pumps and get his health to 0, he'll beg you to kill him. Yi activates the execution module in the stocks and we release him from his torture. He drops a noble ring that says the owner must be from a prominent family. One would suspect Kang Hui must have been from one of the ruling families in the remains of the Ji Kingdom. We don't get much to go on, but this is another one of those bosses where you just don't feel good afterwards. Jiquan needs to be stopped. We escape out of the bottom levels of the factory zone and have to traverse some tricky platforming before we can find a root node to rest up. And we won't be able to walk back to the pavilion for a while, so we're committed to this area. We also get introduced to some of the most annoying enemies in the game, the snipers. Wonderful. Just what we need when we're handling platforming challenges, fucking snipers, thank you Jiquan. When we find a root node, we find it's another unstable one that drags us into the dream realm to learn a new skill, and this one's tricky to nail. Called the Unbounded Counter, this one involves holding the left bumper until Yi charges up his defense and releasing it just as the attack lands. This will allow Yi to deflect crimson attacks as well as sniper and cannon fire. And I will say, at first I didn't get this move. The timing always felt off to me, and I think part of that is down to the poor tutorialization. When you hold the bumper, you create this swirl of green energy that dissipates after a few seconds if you keep holding it. The tutorial messages imply that you have to time the Unbounded Counter to release it right before that energy dissipates, which isn't the case. As long as you have the button held long enough to get the charge started, which is about a half a second, releasing it as an attack lands will deflect the hit. Any hit. It's essential that you perfect this move, as from this point in, you're going to be using it a lot. Every soul boss going forward has at least one move that you need to use the Unbounded Counter on, so get practicing. We continue our rise out of the bottom levels of the factory until we manage to hack a lift and return to an area just below the central part of the map. Yi starts to cough and eventually passes out, only to be saved when Chi-Yu happens upon him and brings him back to the pavilion. Abacus determines that Yi has massive organ damage, ruptures throughout his body, and weakened pulse, and declares that he'll turn the pavilion into a mausoleum if Yi passes away. Which is sort of morbid. Kuafu tries to remain more optimistic, but also claims dibs on his Fangshi robe if Yi does happen to die. Thankfully, Yi opens his eyes and appears to be fine. Well, as fine for someone who's been tortured for the better part of a week can be. Abacus gives us a rundown on Jiquan, pointing out that he is known for violence and treachery, and that he's adept at manipulating minds. We've already witnessed this firsthand, mind, but it's nice to know that Abacus is up to date. Kuafu chips in to say that he's quite stylish, which becomes a bit awkward. Kuafu also happens to want to avoid antagonising Jiquan, challenging Yi's backlash and asking if he's looking for justice or revenge. Xuan is, as usual, the innocent voice of reason here. We haven't checked in on him a little while, so let's get caught up. For a start, he's bonding pretty well with Kuafu, despite the Solarian trying to keep him at arm's length. The boy is even calling him Uncle Chubby, which is so fucking cute it hurts. The seed that we gave him from Gaomang's greenhouse has started to grow into a large tree that will eventually dwarf the pavilion itself. We've also given him some Solarian food to learn how to cook, some beautiful Solarian artwork that Xuan is using as inspiration for his drawings, and he keeps practicing his flute skills. Throughout the story of the game, no matter what we give to Xuan, he takes it on with enthusiasm and considered practice. The boy learns everything we give to him, whether it's the notoriously difficult Solarian strategy game or ancient Solarian sheet music. The boy surprises both Yi and Kuafu with how quickly he picks up what are essentially alien concepts to him. Several of the souls we've already met have pointed out to Yi that Apemen have overly large brains despite being animals, and Xuan's development throughout the story shows Yi and Kuafu what Apemen are actually capable of. In the Peach Blossom Village, they're essentially kept uneducated and stupid, but when exposed to the arts and sciences of Penglai, Xuan picks it up incredibly quickly. Yi thanks Chiyu for bringing him back to the pavilion and essentially saving his life. He's a humble weapon of war, but he asks that if Yi wants to show thanks, he can keep spending money in Chiyu's store. He's found the remains of his brother Jingtian and intends on repairing him, so certain components and items are what he needs to put his brother back together again. He doesn't seem offended that it was us that destroyed his brother, so it's a win all round. And Chiyu becomes a permanent fixture of the pavilion at this point, and we can return to him and shop whenever we want. Incidentally, I don't have the ending to Chiyu's story. Essentially, if you return all of the parts of his brother, at the very end of the game you have to fight his brother again, and that kind of ends Chiyu's story. I didn't get that. I didn't find all the parts, so we won't be covering that in this video. At the other end of the pavilion, we see Xuan and Shenong talking to each other. Shenong is preparing to head out to fight as the transmuted soldiers have made their way to Peach Blossom Village and are raising hell. All of the villagers are missing too. Xuan asks Yi if he'll help, and how can we say no to that sweet kid? Shenong hands us an access key to the abandoned mines underneath the village, a key that no guru gave to him, someone who apparently knew the truth of the village and disappeared long ago. This is our only time-sensitive quest in the game. We don't go straight to the village via the abandoned mines, we won't get to save the villagers, so guess where we're off to? Before we can leave the pavilion, we head into the roots to speak to Leah again. He speaks a little more plainly now, asking Yi how he's faring in his mission and offering consolation at the injuries he sustained at the hands of Ji Quan. We find out that Leah doesn't have any influence on the current of the Tao, that it's never his choice to bring Yi to meet him, but he supposes that the Tao brings the two of them together as they support each other on their respective journeys in their individual timelines. Getting a bit timey-wimey here, folks. Leah fixes our Fusang horn, giving us the ability to warp back to the pavilion again, but he also upgrades it, allowing us to warp between root nodes, which, as you can imagine, is very bloody useful. When doing this, Leah specifically says he's updating the firmware. Yi latches onto this and determines that the horn is a scientific device rather than a religious relic, and he presses Leah on this. Leah tells us that he lost his attachment to scientific exploration years earlier, and he only considered the extra functionality of the horn when he gave it to Yi. Yi is astonished by the technical prowess Leah had, but the oldest Slayer just brushes it off as a mere parlour trick. And with that, we return to the pavilion to carry on. Despite the urgency of the situation, when we return, Xuan asks us to pose for him. He's taking inspiration from the immortal portrait painting we gave him earlier, and he's doing his own version, honing his artistic skills to capture a portrait of Yi in the same style. When Xuan is done, he presents the portrait to us. Both Yi and Abacus try to save the kid's blushes by saying it's unique and stands out from the market. When we actually get to see it, it's really fucking good. Captures Yi's general moodiness perfectly. I don't know what they're talking about. Right, to business. We have a village to save. To get to the village, we need to head via the bottom of the repository and into the old mines. This abandoned mine is completely dark, with only the area directly around Yi illuminated for the most part. There's some tricky blind platforming and combat in this area, where one wrong move can have you hit a spike and be returned to a previous platform. There are timer switches across this area which can turn on lights temporarily, giving us some reprieve when we're in combat, but more often than not they turn off whilst we're in a fight. This counts especially for the mini-boss, Celestial Warden Yin Yu, who you absolutely do not want to fight in the dark. He will fuck you up so quickly if you don't get the lights on first. We also have a new traversal mechanic, laser bridges that Yi can grab onto and be launched across. Get used to them, there's plenty of them to come late in the game. When we cross the mines, we immediately find a stone lore totem dissuading people from exploring beyond the village. Quote, obey the gods and be ignorant. When we return to the village, it's a mess. The houses are damaged or destroyed, the place is riddled with G-Con soldiers, and the holographic sky illusion is glitching out. We work our way towards the Ascension Monument and we encounter another boss, Red Tiger Elite Liguan. This guy's a palette swap of the first boss we fought in the Apeman facility at the start of the game, but with a couple of changes. His moveset is largely the same, but now his attacks leave damaging fire trails on the ground. He also has ads, with multiple kinds of flying enemies spawning in to harass during the fight and increase the pressure on your attention. But once he's down, we enter a holding area and release the Apeman. The shaman is astonished that a god has manifested in front of her, and despite Yi's urgency in wanting to move them on, she's more interested in interrupting him for praise and worship. Thankfully, Shannon interrupts to try and get her to see some sense, to argue that Peach Blossom Village was a lie and that Yi is no god. None of the Solarians are in fact gods. The shaman isn't having any of it though. She doesn't appreciate the danger that the Apemen are in, and she insists that if they pray with sincerity, their lives can go back to normal in spite of everything they've just witnessed, causing Shannon to wash his hands of the villagers. Yi tells her to set up a shelter in this area, which is connected to the space docks and will be much safer than returning to the village. The shaman agrees and offers us some poison to return to Shenong, thanking us for looking after him. When we return here later in the game, the Apemen will have built up their shelters and create a new little village for themselves, hidden from view of the Solarians. However, they have a sick child who has been bitten by a golden serpent, and we need to go off to the Forbidden Cave and kill the monster so a cure can be made for him. This is the first part of the questline we need to do for the true ending, so if you're going for that, don't skip out on it. Once you kill the snake, return to Shenong, get him to eat the poison and brew a cure, then bring it back to the child. Oh yeah, all the poisons that we give to Shenong to make a nice brew, he eats, digests, vomits up again, brewing it in his stomach to an alcoholic beverage that he shares with Yi. Gross, right? Well, with the antidote administered to the child, we give the credit to Shenong and find out that the shaman already knew the truth about Peach Blossom Village, deliberately hiding the reality of New Kunlun from the other Apemen. She was filled with doubt and curiosity at first, not taking everything at face value until she had her awakening and discovered there was a world beyond the village. Yet she kept the secret to herself. She didn't share this inkling with any of the other Apemen, instead encouraging them to continue to be pious and to worship the Solarians. She was the one who wrote the stone tablet in the Forbidden Cave telling the Apemen to live in ignorance. But now the cat is out of the bag, pun thoroughly intended. Praying to the Solarians isn't going to keep the village safe, and they have to find a way to guarantee their own safety from here on in. Now that we have made sure the Apemen are safe, we can pick up where we left off and go after G-Quan once and for all. Let's get down to business to defeat G-Quan. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The Transmutation Factory is the hellhole responsible for 90% of the enemies we face in this game. The G-Kingdom perfected the technology of turning organic matter into remote-controlled clone warriors centuries ago, and we've reached the source. Several of the chambers in this area are periodically filled with damaging radiation that will affect Yi and Yi only. The enemies are immune to it, which is very convenient for them. We have two ways of dealing with this. We can either sprint our way through each section, or hit the shield generators in the middle of each section that will offer us a few seconds of protection, but usually we'll have to deal with some enemies nearby. The plasma is generated by statues that slam forging hammers into the ground. Using the unbounded counter on these hammer blows will smash them, stopping the plasma generation, allowing us to explore a bit more safely. When we destroy the first one, we get some lore about the G-Kingdom, revealing that the kingdom ruled over a desolate land and their only industry of note was mining. Eventually, demand for Jin and Azure became so great that the kingdom began to flourish and they transitioned into becoming a great military power. Jitong, the ruler of the Turbulent Era, leveraged this wealth into the creation of weapons and the transmutation technology to the point where the kingdom became powerful enough to challenge Lear and his Fangxi guild. As Yi ascends to the next part of the factory, we have a cutscene of Ji-Quan sitting around in the nude, drinking tea from the spout of a teapot like some kind of degenerate. He's talking to someone he only refers to as Seer, who is obscured by shadow, Ji-Quan arrogantly pointing out that her predictions haven't come to pass, believing that he's killed Yi, so he doesn't know that we're on our way to wipe that smug smile from his face. The Seer doesn't agree with his appraisal of the situation, telling him that the hexagrams are never wrong, but Ji-Quan remains unmoved. He says the G-Clan have had to endure humiliation and be in hiding since the Turbulent Era, but now is the time to eliminate any obstacles. He doesn't necessarily want to restore the G-Clan's favour, but he wants to protect the Council and consolidate power, which means removing anything in the way. He dismisses the Seer as it's time for his transmutation therapy, because the best combatants get better with drugs. He's a regular Lance Armstrong, this guy. In the upper part of the factory, the production area, we're going to have to deal with some interesting enemies. These pink things are spat out of machines regularly and can only be killed with fire traps. Do enough sword damage to them and they'll collapse into a pile of meat, but after a few seconds they'll reconstitute and keep chasing us down. As we move further into the facility, we see these little pink lads jumping onto other machines which spit out soldiers. So these really are the genetic building blocks for the cloned enemies we're fighting across New Kunlun. Moving through the area, we find a door with 2 hacking statues we need to deal with. This is optional, but it's absolutely worth doing. The first statue is in a room that gets blasted with plasma and happens to have 2 snipers covering each other. So I hope you've gotten good at the unbounded counter to deal with them, because you absolutely do not have the time between plasma blasts to fight them head on. The other statue is at the end of a pretty devious platforming section that features a fun little mechanic to destroy a load of the pink creatures all at once. In the locked room we find the pharmacy panel that tells us a little about transmutation. It's a medicine that combines biological and chemical substances that rewrite one's genetic code. When interacting with the machine we get the gene eradicator that can neutralise transmutations. You can sell this item back at the pavilion, but you absolutely should not, we're going to need it in a minute. When we reach the top level of the factory, before we confront Jiquan, we get a couple of lore drops. The first is a chest containing a sword of Ji, which we can give to Xuan Xuan. It's a defensive sword made for a dignitary of the Ji kingdom. The form and complexity of the sword's design is supposed to reflect the owner's status. Next to that chest is a model of a Haoshan sphere, a giant satellite that the Ji kingdom built near the end of the Turbulent Era, powered by rhizomatic columns capable of destroying entire nations anywhere on Penglai. The Ji kingdom lied to the scientists they got to build the station, claiming that it was an extrasolar satellite to look into deep space and find alien life forms. Instead they built a weapon of catastrophic destruction. Seems on brand from they built the fucking Death Star. But now we can't procrastinate any longer, it's time to challenge Jiquan. When we enter his sanctum, we can use the gene eradicator on a device that will poison him in his transmutation crucible. Jiquan steps out of the chamber full of vim and vigour, absolutely confident in his ability to destroy Yi. But as soon as his health bar appears, he starts to cough uncontrollably, the poison we injected into his transmutation crucible taking effect. He finds this absolutely hilarious, congratulating Yi for being a devious little shit, just like any good G warrior would be. Klingons these guys are not, they do not fight with honour. Jiquan believes all Solarians should be more selfish, more willing to break the rules to win and to get what they desire. Despite the Ji kingdom having fallen hundreds of years earlier due to this specific line of thinking, he won't be moved. He believes that once Eigong has cured the Tiandao, the Ji clan will rise again, stronger than ever under his rule. The benefit of spiking his mutation fluid for us is that Jiquan in his first phase will now periodically stop fighting when a coughing fit overtakes him, giving us windows to get in some free damage or a moment's respite to heal in what is going to be a brutal fight. Jiquan is the first major difficulty spike for most players. He's from a warrior civilization, he's one of the greatest warriors in Ji's history, he was never going to be a pushover. Jiquan has a dizzying amount of attacks. He summons multiple different weapons to his hands, a halberd, a sword, at least 2 different kinds of spears that he can string into huge combos of stabs, sweeps, pulls, dashes and hits. These combos can hit you on the front and backswing too. He also has kunai that he will throw at you to try and make space, spiked mines that he can scatter across the arena, and he can teleport from place to place. He also has a Crimson attack where he swings the halberd blade overhead and slams it to the ground, causing pillars of fire to blast upwards across the arena, zoning you out. Lastly, he can generate a shield that gives him a moment to drink some tea and regain some health. Oh, and once you get his first health bar down, he'll drink some of the transmutation fluid, buff all of his attacks up, he'll get faster, he'll do more damage, and he also cures the cough that we gave him. Great! The key to this fight is, unhelpfully, perfection. There's no cheese in this fight that I could find. Jiquan is a test of everything you've learned so far. You have to dash through some of his attacks, deflect others. You can't allow either of his Crimson attacks to land, so you need to perfect the unbounded counter for the overhead swipe and the Tai Chi kick for the dashing spear stab. You have to know when to engage and when to disengage, how to make enough space to avoid taking damage, but also close enough to exploit his really short windows for receiving damage. I'm not exaggerating when I say this fight is intense. Even watching my footage back as I write the script, I can feel my heart rate creeping up. This is a battle of attrition that will demand all of your concentration. Once you've internalised the moveset though, you will battle like you've never battled before. This is a ridiculously fast duel and you'll be moving back and forth across the arena at speeds you've not achieved yet. If I can compare Jiquan to any other boss that ups the stakes, he's this game's version of Genichiro from Sekiro. He's just that good and equally as demanding. Once you've emptied a second health bar, he tries to give you the classic villain "did you think that was it?" speech. He drinks another pot of his special tea, his muscles growing even bigger as he starts to ascend to his final form. Only for his body not to be able to take it anymore. He grows and mutates so much his body collapses into itself, killing him with his own transmutation. It's pretty apt. Claiming his soul seal, we see memories of Ji-Quan as a child, staring up reverently at a statue of Ji-Tong, stating his determination to return the honour to the Ji clan, only for him to be tormented by a bully, the statue itself being defaced and decapitated. The memories cut forward to Ji-Quan as a young adult, overloading the transmutation crucible and jacking himself to be stronger and stronger, risk be damned. We then see him commanding the enslavement of Apemen, calling them experimental material. His final memory shard is him standing and addressing his genetically engineered army, readying them for battle. His seal is the character Wu, which signifies discipline. Including Eigong, that's 6 soul seals in our possession now, 4 more to go. As we go to leave the sanctum, Yi has a bit of a moment, coughing up some blood. Abacus calls concern for his well-being. He tells Yi that someone has attacked the firewall protecting the pavilion from outside interference. The next enemy may be closer than we expect. When we return to the pavilion and speak to Abacus, he's identified the source of the attack and the strange signals he's intercepting. It's very close, the Cortex Center, which is just west of the central pavilion. You know, that area where we had the weird horror jump scare earlier in the game. Yeah, there. When we teleport here, the place looks different. Gone is the massive computer system that was here before. Instead, there are crimson hibiscus flowers all over the place and a huge glowing entrance. Something fucky is going on. When we step inside the entrance, we appear in a purple-tinted mountainous world. The mystic nymph immediately flies away from us, getting trapped in a digital-looking flower just past a mysterious woman. This woman is Lady Ethereal, our next Solarian. She sits suggestively wrapped in a towel. Her dialogue is almost dreamlike as she tries but fails to recognise Yi. There's something about him that's familiar to her, but she can't place it. All the questions Yi asks her are answered with more questions. She doesn't appear to know where she is either, or if she does, she's hiding it well. She tells Yi not to worry and to come have a soak in the hot baths. Yi doesn't look too happy sitting in the baths. If I'm honest, he looks furious. Lady Ethereal keeps asking who we are and keeps answering our questions with half answers. When Yi asks her for a soul seal, she remarks on how beautiful it is, and if he's looking for beautiful things, he should take whatever he wants from the springs. She talks about the perfection of the location, where the sun shines all the time and where there are lots of friends to hang out with, although we're alone here. She starts to talk to people who aren't here, friends from her lab, slowly remembering that she worked on a project but not what the project was. She also mentions Yi, but not that he's sat in front of her, just her memory of Yi. Having had enough of this, Yi leaves the pool and we get to some platforming. This may be my favourite area in the game. There's very little combat in this place, it's mostly pure platforming. Reality isn't what it seems here. There's a light world and a dark world that interact and intersect with each other. When you're in the light side of the world, the darkness will reveal platforms that won't persist when the darkness recedes. The darkness can also turn the little motes of glowing grass into damaging spikes. There's some floating creatures that are invulnerable in the light but become weak in the darkness. There's a real Celeste vibe to this area and I absolutely love it. After the first main platforming section, we come back to the hot baths as the screen glitches and artifacts. This time there's a collection of Solarians bathing as Lady Ethereal watches over them from the side. If you hadn't guessed by now, we're in the Soulscape, which is the software that Lady Ethereal built into the Eternal Cauldron that Yi designed. This is what's keeping the Solarians in suspended animation while Eigong works on a cure for the Tiandao. When we talk to her this time, she once again invites Yi to take a load off and relax, telling him that it's a place with no pain and suffering. In the background, the relaxing Solarians invite us into the water, trying to tempt us, saying that our friends and family are all here. We decide to move on. The next platforming section kicks things up a gear, with flowers that fire orbs into the air that we can bounce off with the Tai Chi kick. We're going to be stringing together moves to cross what initially appears to be huge tracts of empty space. The other bit of new movement tech that we learn involves these eyeball things that are suspended in midair. When we do the Tai Chi kick on them, they spawn bubbles of darkness. Our third time at the hot springs, one of the Solarians in the background looks like he's glitching out. He's got a 1,000-yard stare and his eyes are kind of vibrating. The others in the spring don't seem phased though. The screen cuts out and glitches again. As we talk to Lady Ethereal, this Solarian in the background can be seen to say this mess is all your fault. She's talking in riddles again, musing on the idea of perception of time and whether Yi's time flows the same as hers. Moving on from this insanity, the platforming challenge ramps up here, putting everything we've learned so far together with dense, complicated jumps and dashes. But when we reach the end of it, we find 2 of Lady Ethereal's memory shards, the ones we normally get right as we take a soul seal. We see her congratulating her team of scientists, the same Solarians we can see in the hot springs when we've been talking to her. The second one has her observing one of her scientists about to test the Eternal Cauldron, the scientist assuring Lady Ethereal that she believes in her designs for the soulscape. We reach the hot baths once again and more of the background Solarians are glitching out, their eyes vibrating ominously. Another one can be seen saying, "Why are you the only one left unscathed?" End quote. Lady Ethereal is starting to suffer. Her pupils are distorted as she describes having a nightmare. In her dream she thought everything was going well, but it wasn't. She ignored the warning signs of disease, but it was already spreading under her skin. Blisters, scabs, gangrene, she'd pick at them and they'd fester. She starts to panic. Yi tries to calm her down, reminding her she's in the soulscape, the software layer of the Eternal Cauldron. She starts to remember. The pods that Yi designed would work to keep the body healthy, but the brain would die as they couldn't maintain brain activity. So Lady Ethereal created the soulscape to maintain the function of the brain during hibernation. Yi tries to get it to snap back to reality, but she rebuffs him, seemingly more content in the dream world than the waking world. Back to platforming and we get a new tool, a flower similar to the one that the nymph is currently trapped in. Hitting it with our sword produces motes of darkness that stick to Yi, allowing him to traverse the upcoming platforming sections with a bubble of darkness around him to reveal hidden platforms. It's surprisingly tricky as you've got very little foreknowledge of where you need to jump, so you need to be able to read what's coming very quickly, lest you fall off the world. This area also introduced the idea of hostile enemies that you can only damage in the darkness by throwing a celestial enemy to deal with before we get to the next hot spring. Now all but one of the background Solarians are glitching out and a new line of dialogue saying, quote, "I wish I'd never met you," end quote. The creepy vibes are getting worse and worse the further into this purple nightmare we get. Lady Ethereal doesn't have anything important to say here, so we press on. We now have a mini-boss to deal with. Celestial Enforcer Huang Shan is a beefed up version of the floating enforcers we've been dealing with for most of the game. The main mechanic in this fight is he throws out energy balls ensconced in darkness that turn the grass on the floor of the arena into spikes, but thankfully a Tai Chi kick on these things destroys them, so we just have to make sure to hit them as quickly as possible and get back to fighting the boss. He also has a Crimson Spear attack, a Crimson Kunai, and a Spinning Discus, all of which can be blocked by the Unbounded counter. Once the Enforcer has been defeated, we return to the springs once more. Everyone is glitching out now, and Lady Ethereal is sitting in a deep state of distress. When we speak to her, she's lost everyone. She can't see them anymore. Yi tries to tell her she's not well and that her soulscape has become unstable, to which she says that she killed them all with her own hands. She begs for forgiveness. She's saying sorry over and over again as she comes unstuck from her own mental state, telling us that she didn't do enough to take care of everyone in the soulscape. In a moment of lucidity, she sees Yi as he is for the first time. She begs Yi to pin the blame on her, to punish her, to tell her it's all her fault. She then tells Yi to hit her. In fact, no, she begs Yi to hit her, so awkwardly we oblige. But it's not enough. She doesn't feel like she deserves mercy at all. She knows they're all dead. All of her scientists are dead. So many of the Solarians are dead. She wants to be hit again, and once again we oblige. This time she transforms. She laughs horrifically as the darkness bubble expands and the scene transforms into a blood-filled pool with the dead, blackened eyes of her scientists staring passively at us. It's like a scene from a horror movie. The mystic nymph breaks free from the flower and we give chase for it. Also, this is the Red Candle games we all know. For the final platforming section, we follow the nymph on a preset path. It has a field of darkness around it and it moves fast. We have to keep on our toes here to keep up and make sure we don't fall behind. On every checkpoint platform, we see memorials to the dead scientists Lady Ethereal feels responsible for. At the end of this section, we enter a door and we get Lady Ethereal's remaining memory shards. The first one shows the chaos in her lab. 4 of her scientists have hung themselves. One is sat pulling his own eye out, one is dead on the floor, another is rocking back and forth in madness, and the final one is holding Lady Ethereal down, choking her, tears pouring from her unfocused eyes as Lady Ethereal begs her to wake up. The next shard shows Eigong presenting the Eternal Cauldron project to the Solarians with Yi and Ethereal by her side. Lady Ethereal lied, saying the test was a success and the Cauldron wouldn't have any problems. But instead, the people who went into the soulscape went mad. They became violent or suicidal when they came out of it. We step towards where the final shard usually is, but we walk into a darkened forest. we see Lady Ethereal's soul seal and a vision of her crying behind it. This isn't usually how it goes. When we try to take the soul seal, she comes into focus, saying we're not real, her madness taking over and her vision glitching out. Oh no, this isn't good. She clasps her hands and tells us to get out, kicking us out of our soulscape and back to the real world. The illusion of the flowers is gone. We're in the central cortex and we can see her brain and nervous system tied to an almost infinite number of brains in the background. The Apeman brains that the Solarians have been harvesting for 5 centuries to keep themselves alive in the cauldron. Abacus calls after finally reacquiring our signal and confirms to us the brain we're looking at is Lady Ethereal's. He's surprised that we managed to not be swallowed by her consciousness in the soulscape, but he's happy that we're safe. Bad news is she's holding on to her soul seal with all of the strength of her mind, and we have to go into the soulscape and defeat it to take it from her. When we head back in, Lady Ethereal confronts us, full of confidence and malice. She knows we've come for revenge. She's aware she did nothing to help Yi when the council went after him, but she throws out that Yi did nothing to prevent the damage her soulscape would eventually cause, much to Yi's surprise as he thought everything worked perfectly. Lady Ethereal believes that it was too perfect, that people could be whatever they wanted in their dream world, causing the lines of reality and dream to blur, resulting in people not wanting to wake up when the dream ends. They all go mad. She blames Yi for all this death. Despite her software being flawed, she hates him for pushing the Solarians into this technology that he built. The entire council is to blame, but Yi is in front of her and she won't let him go. She gives Yi 2 options: kill her or stay in her soulscape forever to atone for their collective sins. Now we have my favourite boss, not only in the game, but in any Metroidvania I've ever played. For me, this fight is utterly perfect. A wonderful collection of madness that escalates over the length of the fight. Before I get into it, I want to talk very quickly about my previous favourite Metroidvania boss fight, the Mantis Lords in Hollow Knight. Trust me, this is relevant. This fight has the knight challenging the 3 remaining lords at the bottom of the Mantis village. When you challenge them, the central figure leaps into the fight and she shows you everything you need to learn. She will cover every possible move in their repertoire. It's not a difficult phase, but it's a lesson. When you defeat her, the other 2 jump in at the same time and the fight comes into its own. It's a deft ballet, as you have to manage space, keep moving, and read every movement to take them down. I adore boss fights like this. I love a fight that constantly escalates and reaches a natural crescendo, and this is what Lady Ethereal does. This is our first 3-phase fight. Yeah, you heard me, 3 phases. In the first phase, you're fighting Lady Ethereal by herself. She'll teleport around the arena, popping back into view to launch one of her attacks. She has a trio of kunai that she throws out at you, a couple of melee swipes, an energy ball you can kick off to earn a talisman and achieve more height, and a trio of crimson attacks. One being a claw swipe, the other being a vertical slam, and the other being 3 horizontal kunai that you can avoid or deflect with the unbounded counter. So far, so manageable. In the second phase, she spawns 2 extra copies of herself from the souls of the fallen scientists on the hanging tree behind her. Yeah, it's dark. The 2 copies won't take any damage when they're hit, but all 3 entities will work in tandem to keep you moving. The aim of the game here is to find the real Lady Ethereal and do damage to her. Once you slap a talisman on her or stun her out of a crimson attack, the copies will despawn, allowing you to land hits on her unmolested or have a moment to heal. Unlike the Gaomang fight, the timing of their attacks makes much more sense and they don't tend to cross over each other. Instead, you are constantly pressured, but there's enough space between each ethereal that you can read which attack is going to come next and usually position yourself appropriately to deal with it. And then we get to phase 3. Fuck me. But phase 3 has Lady Ethereal spawning in 6 copies of herself. She always kicks off the phase with a massive bomb attack that I'm about 70% sure you can deflect with the unbounded counter, but I never managed to pull it off. The pressure in this phase is relentless. You have to be constantly moving, constantly shifting position to make sure you're facing the right way to deflect incoming attacks from all directions, and ready to punish any moment where you find the real Lady Ethereal. The key to beating this phase is to fully internalize everything that the first 2 parts of the fight taught you. Everything here is about reacting appropriately, and there's little to no scope for making mistakes. There's barely even opportunities to heal, so make sure you go into this phase with full health and hope to God you don't take damage from that opening bomb attack. By the time I finished this fight, I was 100% confident that 9 Souls was my game of the year for 2024. I've not enjoyed a boss fight this much in such a long time. When you finally defeat Lady Ethereal, she returns to lucidity. She then apologises to Yi for having to see her in this state. She tells Yi that she had tried to cut off her own life support when she realised things had gone wrong, but she still couldn't wake up from the nightmare, not realising her brain had been reconnected to her vital sanctum. She was initially confused by the nightmares, the whole point of the system being that people should sleep peacefully, but her guilt was so great that the only way she could comfort herself was to punish herself with these horrible dreams. She needed someone to punish her and condemn her for all the pain she wrought, hence her asking Yi to hit her. In her final moments, Lady Ethereal turns to face the scientists who suffered and died because of her. She accepts her role in their deaths, not absolving herself of her guilt, but accepting it, and she fades away. The mystic nymph returns to Yi as he enters another memory of his time on Penglai with Heng. They're working together on the nymph. It's taking charge from the roots in the machine he built. They bicker over the name as Yi prepares to launch the nymph for the first time. All that's left to do is charge it up with the rhizomatic energy from the roots, and then it'll come alive in front of them and take flight. But Heng is worried. She still hears the roots talking, and she tells him they've been crying out like they can't breathe. Yi, as usual, dismisses her concerns. He's confident in his theory work, he knows it's going to work, but he also believes any problems encountered are good learning moments. She doesn't follow his logic, and he insults her, turning on the machine despite her concerns, and, well, just watch. We come to, after this horrendous memory, with Lady Ethereal's soul seal in our possession. The character is Shin, which signifies benevolence. But just to roll back a minute or so, I didn't want to talk over the cutscene, but here's my explanation of it. The rhizomatic energy overloads Yi's machine, causing it to explode. Yi throws himself in front of Heng and saves her life at the cost of his own. We watch his heart stop as he lies dead on the floor. Heng's tears and her connection to the primordial roots for Sang beckon the roots forth. They wrap around the pair of children just like they did for Yi after his betrayal, and they heal him, bringing him back to life in Heng's arms. We'll catch up with the memories a little later and see what happens next, but ultimately, despite his dismissive nature, the roots prove to him that there's more to them than just a simple energy source. Back in the pavilion, when we rest at the central root, we're taken to see the Dream Realm again. We're getting our final piece of movement tech, the classic double jump. At this point, we've got all the tools we need to push to the end of the game, but we don't get to leave just yet. Before we can leave, we're brought to see Leah, who asks if he said we'd met before. It finally clicks for Yi that the warrior who's been training with us from across time and space was Leah, the Leah that fought Ji Tong during the Turbulent era. Our combined training across the flow of the Tao is what helped Leah and his army prevail against the Ji Kingdom and bring peace to Penglai. Yi has stern words for Leah though. He sees Leah as someone who led the Fangxi to isolation and ruled the Solarians via inaction, abandoning what made the Fangxi Guild great in the first place. Leah turned the Solarians towards faith and religion over science, which set the advancement of the species back hundreds of years and forced scientists like Yi and the rest of the council to work in secret. Leah is unmoved by Yi's determination of him, but as he seeks the Tao, he also seeks repentance. Yi asks if he wants to join him in saving the Solarians once again, but Leah is too old to help. He has long since died and exists between life and the Tao, unable to return to the current timeline. Yi has far too many questions to ask Leah, but our time with him is over for now. We have to get back to work. Now that we have a double jump, we can get to one of the final areas of the game. This starts off with the Sky Tower, which we can reach from the Bell Room where we met the mysterious Solarian right at the beginning of the game. Climbing this tower involves some precise platform. There's nothing too much relevant to the story here until we reach the top. At the very top of the tower we find some lore, a warning saying that the water in the Empyrean district has been contaminated. The district was the designated living and hibernation area for the Solarians who were travelling on New Kunlun to the Pale Blue Planet. Most of the Solarians who came on the journey would never have left this area, only a select few would have descended the Sky Tower to the facilities we've been ransacking throughout the game. The note doesn't tell us what the water has been contaminated with, but it won't be long until we find out. When we finally emerge in the district, we get a call from Abacus telling us that he would expect the district to be opulent and splendourous. After all, it's the most exclusive address on New Kunlun. He also warns us that security up here is going to be top tier, so we've got that to look forward to. And bearing in mind what we just learned about the contaminated water, the building we arrived from has a fountain on top and the water is pink, which is weird. Abacus is right, the Empyrean district is posh as fuck. This place is definitely nicer than anywhere we've seen so far, the pavilion included. The fancy architecture and well-tended gardens hide some utter bullshit. To start with, see this guy hanging around the background? Yeah, they're a new enemy for this area and they're dicks. They will wait until you walk past, then appear out of nowhere and ruin your day before disappearing back off into the scenery somewhere, prepping their next day-ruining surprise attack. I hate them. All the buildings in this district are initially locked off, so we're going to have to do some casual breaking and entering up the side of one of the residence buildings. Gradually we'll work our way around the buildings, restoring power, opening doors and activating lifts. Classic Metroidvania. The buildings here are a mix of residences, tailors, bars, clubs, restaurants, everything a well-heeled Solarian could possibly want on his or her journey into infinity. But all is not as it seems. In fact, there's something very, very wrong in the Empyrean district. As we loop around and explore, we'll eventually uncover some of the horrors that New Kunlun has been hiding. We meet one of the Shanghai 9000 machines in a bar early on in the level. I haven't talked about these, but they're essentially area guides who welcome people into each area. They also contain map chips which you can bring back to the Shanghai 9000 in the pavilion to build out your map. Each one usually has a little something to say about each area, but this one in particular tells ye of the irregular awakenings that are happening in the district. Solarians are waking up from their suspended animation, but they're not lucid, they're erratic and irritable. Despite the problems across New Kunlun, people should not be waking up. In the next room from the Shanghai 9000, we find a bulletin board proclaiming that all services in the Empyrean district had ended and all residents were to report to suspended animation. Interestingly enough, the lore we get from this tablet also tells us that so-called stress-relieving agents, or drugs, were added to the food and drink in the district supposedly to help the emotional stability of the residents. I might be being cynical, but I don't think that was the reason for it. We work further into the area, and what the fuck is that? Seriously, what the fucking fuck is that? Just standing there. Menacingly. Remember, Red Candle Games cut their teeth on horror games. We should not be surprised by messed up stuff in this game. With the next lift activator, we come face to face with this monstrosity. Thankfully it's not very strong, it goes down quick. And it gets back up. Let's go up a level. Oh look, there's bigger ones covered in spikes. That also don't die! What the hell happened here? The Solarians in charge of this area are actually a brother and sister duo. Fuxi and Nuwa Feng are socialite twins who host the best parties and live the most hedonistic lifestyles. As we explore the living quarters, we find Fuxi's home, but no one's here. We can just take his seal. But when we enter his vital sanctum, we see his memory shards. First being their first day of life, welcome to a glorious era of existence. As they grow into children, Fuxi expresses a love for theatre and acting, but their mother chastises them for dabbling in what she calls lower-class pursuits. As the Tiandao took hold, the Fengs offered their families vast wealth to fund the research, possibly with profits to be made in time. Finally, as people are arriving on New Kunlun, the Fengs are charged with hosting banquets and becoming the entertainers of the wealthiest Solarians as New Kunlun launches. The final shot is blank though, the dialogue just saying, has the play started yet? When we leave the vital sanctum, Nuwa calls us, essentially telling us to leave her and Fuxi alone. She doesn't care if we take the Soul Seal or whatever we want from the Empyrean district, she just wants to remain undisturbed. She has banquets to focus on, of course. Yi asks if she's seen the state of the district and how she can wonder about banquets. All she has to say is she thinks the architecture is tacky and the restaurants were all terrible. When Yi spells it out and points out the walking corpses are monstrosity, she just waves it off, calling them hooligans who didn't take to their soulscapes. She ends the call pretty abruptly, telling us to go and bother Eigong, not her. Rude. Either way, we have Fuxi's soul seal, the character Bing, which signifies integrity. Despite what Nuwa said, we're obviously not leaving without her soul seal, so we push on to the Empyrean district's sanctum. As we enter the area, we get another call from Heng. She starts by telling us she cut herself a while ago, but her health has gotten bad, so the wound won't heal. She's in pain all the time and she's finding everything tiring by herself. She misses Yi and wants him to come home, even just for a moment. The scene shifts to Penglai. Heng is playing her flute in a field of Tianhao flowers and memorial stones as Yi approaches her. They talk awkwardly, the implication being that their parents have succumbed to the virus, passing away quickly and peacefully. We find out that Yi didn't attend the funeral. Yi was away working and didn't get back in time. Heng tells Yi that the hospitals have been totally overwhelmed by those infected with the virus. Yi tells that every house he passed was covered in white cloth and Tianhao flowers were growing everywhere on the ground. The Solarian race is collapsing under the weight of the infection. The flowers have a white tinge to them. Yi believes that it's depriving Penglai of colour, but Heng thinks they're pretty and serene, as if everyone was returning to their original colours once their suffering ended. Yi knows that Tianhao is out of control, and he's considered pushing the launch of New Kunlun forward in an attempt to save as many people as possible. Heng has an alternative idea, that the Solarians dying out from the Tianhao could just be their destiny. That after millennia of taking from Penglai, the Solarians have to pay it all back. Yi asks if she's okay, saying she seems like a different person. She says no, she hasn't changed. The implication hanging in the air is that it's Yi who's changed. She tells Yi that she can still feel their parents, that she thinks they've returned to the roots. She believes that the Tianhao is a transition, not an ending. That life and death are the same thing, and that as long as they have lived, the Tao will remember them. Remember their lives, remember everything. Heng starts to ask Yi not to mourn her when she dies, but he shouts at her, telling her that he's heard enough. Yi is determined that Heng won't end up like their parents. He has a place for her on New Kunlun, and when everything is ready to launch, he will come back and collect her. The memory ends in the ruins of a gazebo in the sanctum. Yi alone in the dark, the corpses of Solarians littering the surroundings. We press on, that's all we can do. If you thought the residences of the Empyrean district were in a sorry state, the sanctum is worse. There are more of the walking corpses and abominations filling the halls. The spiny mutated growth sticks to every surface. Everything has gone to hell here. We get a call from Kwafu who confirms the monsters we're seeing are Solarians. Yi is confused, wondering why the Tianhao has kept mutating. It should have been suspended as the Solarians were in suspended animation. They have no idea how to trace the cause, but Kwafu confirms that nothing like this was noticed in his zone over the last 500 years. Something is up. We reach a grand entrance and can hear the sound of party music playing in the background. We found the Feng twins and their banquet. We walk in to see the most decadent banquet. There are people spun out, dancing, hooking up. Everything is bathed in soft purple light, and we see the colossal Fuxi sat in the foreground, gripping his lute, mutated bubbles on his wrists, with Nuwa sitting daintily next to him on her floating stool with her flute in hand. Nuwa tries to get us to leave, telling us this is a private party and we weren't invited. Yi points out the apocalypse happening outside, but Nuwa is just interested in her banquet. The outside world doesn't matter as long as she's having fun. Yi presses saying there might be some hope to save the surviving Solarians if they work fast, but Nuwa doesn't believe him, minimising the horrors we've just fought through. Apparently the Council have always been low on parts to keep the soulscapes working, she tells us, and the countless Solarians have died in their sleep because of technical failures. Her head is fully in the sand, but she still loves New Kunlun because she can party for eternity with never-ending music and guests always ready to play. Yi gives up, demanding Nuwa's soul seal and saying he'll leave them alone. But before she can agree, Fuxi starts to move, his dialogue distorted and only understandable by Nuwa. She looks worried, trying to comfort him as he animates. He's saying something to her, but it's not translating for us. She apologises to him and tells him she's going to make things right. Her tune changes. Apparently Fuxi told her that Yi is erratic and that he hates the rich and powerful, that if she handed over her soul seal then Yi would just come back to hurt the two of them. Fuxi tells her that we might even destroy New Kunlun. She resolves that there's only one thing for it, as Fuxi stands up, shrugging off his robe to show just how mutated he is. Gripping his lute like a club, the fight begins, with Nuwa providing a soundtrack to the battle. The Fangs make for a pretty fun and unique boss fight. You'll only ever be fighting Fuxi directly, with Nuwa joining in for the second phase. Fuxi is a massive beast of an opponent. He's surprisingly nimble for his size, and he can cross the arena faster than you would expect. He's also pretty relentless in his attacks, so you won't find many opportunities to punish him. He uses his lute like a club in his left hand, and his right is a giant mutated claw. He will leap at you, slam his lute down, or bash you with a stabbing motion with it. With his claw, he has a leaping slam that transitions into a backwards drag that you absolutely need to make sure you're facing the right way to deal with. He can also turn his mutated hand into a giant blade for a crimson attack that will cause fire to spread across the ground from wherever he's hit. If you get too far away, he'll sprint or leap at you, dragging his claw along the ground for a huge uppercut that can knock you into the air. In the second phase, Nuwa gets involved. As she plays her flute, she spawns in floating blades that will home in on Yi, damaging plasma balls that we can use the Tai Chi kick to bounce off, and a homing damage field that will follow Yi for a few seconds, forcing us to move around and avoid it. She can also spawn in phantom snakes with a few different forms. A single snake that flows along the ground in either direction, or 3 sets of 6 snakes that flow down from the ceiling columns, and finally a staggered phalanx of snakes that come down from the ceiling, tracking Yi along the arena. And all the while, we still need to manage Fuxi. It's overwhelming. My advice for this fight is to work on getting Fuxi's phase down without taking damage. He's intimidating, but ultimately not that difficult. For the second phase, your concentration is going to be repeatedly split, so you need to be able to see Nuwa's attacks incoming whilst reacting appropriately to Fuxi's movements. You have to pick your moments to deal with Fuxi. For instance, if he's charging up his Crimson attack but Nuwa has a couple of blades in play, you'll never manage to charge up your unbounded counter without being interrupted, so it's better to move out the way and parry the blades, avoiding Fuxi's attack and the fire. When Nuwa summons the snakes, you just have to avoid them, so make use of your dash and try your best to learn which directions they come from and in which order. And if you need space, make use of the Azure Bow as it can stun Fuxi for a moment. When you defeat Fuxi, you overcome the power of his mutation. His shoulder is separated from his arm, but the mutation is trying to continue to heal him, causing his face to swell and blow his mask off, showing how devastatingly ugly the once beautiful actor has become. Nuwa tries to play the music to bring him back, but it doesn't work. She sees what we've done and she screams. She falls from her floating stool, reaching out to her dying brother, crying that she put so much effort into his makeup. Yi tries to make her see what a state he was in. The corpse is almost completely decayed, he's been dead since before New Kunlun lifted off. Nuwa is hysterical with grief, saying he'll be fully cured if he keeps getting his shots. His shots? She tries to comfort her mutated brother, saying that New Kunlun has done away with sickness and death. She hugs him, telling him when he's better they'll go to the theatre. Then his corpse erupts into the spikes we've seen all over the Empyrean district, killing Nuwa instantly. Fucking brutal. In their dressing room, we enter Nuwa's vital sanctum. In the first memory shot, Nuwa is looking over the destitute dying in the street as Fuxi tells her not to dwell on it. We then see Fuxi helping Nuwa get ready, saying she's beautiful and calling her the clan's lead actress. We then see Nuwa at Fuxi's bedside, Eigong in the background saying she's developing a new cure that Fuxi can try out. Before we move on to Fuxi, already huge and mutated, being cared for by Nuwa. She tells him it's time for his shot and he'll be better in no time. The final memory shot is Nuwa and Fuxi in one of their performances, before his mutation, and they look happy. Their story is really sad. For all they come off like terrible, decadent people, the twins loved each other deeply and Nuwa was desperately trying to bring her brother back, only to be ultimately betrayed by the false hope that Eigong sold her. We take Nuwa's soul seal, which contains the character Geng. Which signifies selflessness. I'm beginning to think these seals are handed out ironically. In Nuwa's private sanctum, we find a vial of Tiandao serum that we can give to Abacus for analysis. It mentions it originates from the research centre, and it's not something most ordinary people would have access to. Before we can speak to Abacus though, Xuan interrupts us to show that he's made dinner. Throughout the game, as we've been given him different Solarian artefacts, one of them was a cookbook. Koafu, or Uncle Chubby, had mentioned to Xuan that he missed the food from Penglai, so the boy took it upon himself to use the cookbook to learn how to cook Solarian cuisine. And Xuan has nailed it, giving Yi a moment of respite from the constant violence and horrors he's subjecting himself to. The simple act of sitting down and having a meal is something that feels so alien to him, yet he starts to relax as the three of them dine and chat. Until Koafu asks about a dish in the middle of the table. Xuan said it was unfinished because he couldn't find an ingredient, a sated heart. Koafu tries to tell him not to finish the dish, but Xuan thinks the dish sounds fun. You know, peachy primate paradise? Yikes. One of my favourite parts of the game is the journey that Yi goes on. Think back to the start of the game. He doesn't care for ape men other than Xuan. He starts the game pretty much still seeing them as animals, like the rest of the Solarians do. But as the game progresses and his relationship with Xuan deepens, he starts to soften. They play a strategy game together and Xuan slowly starts to get better, but in the process, Yi starts to slowly open up about his feelings, about his quest for revenge, and even offers him little tidbits about Heng. At the end of the meal, when Koafu has told Xuan never to make peachy primate paradise, the boy asks if it's not a nice meal, to which Yi replies saying that he can't ever imagine eating it again. It's really sweet. Most Metroidvanias have you playing a mute character who's usually some kind of blank slate for the player, or in the case of Hollow Knight, a literal empty vessel. Nine Souls bucks this trend, giving Yi an actual character arc, his own motivations and his own agency in the story, and I really do enjoy this aspect of the game. It drew me in and had me really invested in the quieter moments in between each major section of the game. After dinner, we take the sample we found to Abacus for analysis. Abacus determines that the serum isn't a cure, instead it's a catalyst for the Tiandao virus to mutate. Every time Noir was injecting it into Fuxi, it was changing the virus and encouraging further mutations. These mutations also happen to be infectious, which explains how it spread so comprehensively through the Empyrean district. Eigong, Yi's former master, is behind this. She's the only one with the knowledge and the breadth of the research into the Tiandao that could pull this off. Abacus tells us if he can isolate a certain genetic marker, he can build a countermeasure for the mutants to kill them. We need to find the DNA of a Solarian that ages very, very slowly, apparently. For now, we need to head back out to find our next Solarian. We're in the home straight, we only need 2 more Sol Seals to take control of New Kunlun. We're off to one of the oldest areas of the island, the Grotto of Scriptures. This area can be accessed via the Lake Yaochi ruins, but in my playthrough I ended up here during my exploration of the Sky Tower, so I kind of found things in the wrong order. From where I entered the area, and via a few little platform challenges involving ropes, spikes and enemies, I find our friend, the mysterious Solarian who's been following us around the map, and he's been waiting for us. Not creepy at all, not at all. Apparently it's been fated we would meet him here at this time. He asks if we're here to offer incense for the fallen Taoist saints, even though he knows that's not why we're here. But what he doesn't know is the motive for us being here, he just knows the outcome. He warns us of the traps ahead, saying many lives were lost when the council were mining the place for Fangshi technology, suggesting there might be stuff related to Leah hidden in this zone. He definitely knows more than he's letting on. In fact, as he describes Leah arriving here with the Fangshi Guild, he speaks as if he was there at the time, despite it being many eons since Leah was alive. The Grotto is where Leah made his inaction declaration, where he put the Solarians on the path to a Taoist way of life after the turbulent era ended and Penglai was unified in peace. When Yi asks if he knows him, he refers to him as the new saviour of the Solarians, setting off his suspicions. Yi asks if he's a member of the ancient Kunlun tribe who left New Kunlun before it was launched, a people rumoured to have special abilities like precognition, but that's not it. The mysterious Solarian asks if we would like him to divine Yi's future, to ask the hexagrams what fate awaits Yi. Surprisingly enough, despite his skepticism, Yi agrees. He floats in front of him and calls the hexagrams forth, divining Yi's future, causing him to open his eyes wide in surprise and then laugh, then talk to someone who isn't there. If you're confused at this point, join the club. We're all confused here. Pull up a chair. He tells Yi that he's only observed divergence amongst a handful of souls over the last few millennia, then tells us he cannot divulge what he saw in the hexagrams, but instead to come to his royal hall in the depths of the grotto, confirming to Yi that he is the one, the only, G, the next Sol on our list. Abacus calls us as soon as G disappears to tell us that he's worked out that our mysterious friend is G. The timing is uncanny. Now we have our next target, we need to survive the grotto, which is just as dangerous as G warned us. The whole place is rigged to kill people. There are rolling spiked boulders, constant enemy ambushes, countless spike traps, and puzzles that can leave you disoriented and confused. Or at least they left me disoriented and confused. There's a lot of lore to this area, but we're going to have to work hard for it. Notably, there is this door, which shows that there are 3 locks to overcome before we can go inside. To unlock this room, we have to find 3 action puzzle rooms and complete them, so there's a lot of exploration to do. As we search for these puzzle rooms, we find one of the Taoist stone carvings, carved in the Origin era, which is after the Turbulent era. It tells of Leah and the Fangshi Guild sealing off Kunlun after the inaction declaration, letting the island fall from people's memories. Eventually, when it was rediscovered and reopened, Kunlun became a holy site for the Taoist Solarians, their adulation shifting from the primordial roots to Leah. Devotees would gather in the Grotto of Scriptures and try to feel the Tao directly. There is a legend that somewhere in the grotto is the grave of Leah himself, although it's never actually been found. Whilst exploring the area, we find a statue of Leah holding the Tao in his hands. Yi takes a moment to bow in reverence before receiving another call from Heng. She says that Peace Day and Leah Day are both coming up, and that she and a few of the remaining Solarians on Penglai are planning to celebrate. She says that the neighbours that have lost the most family tend to present larger offerings for the festival. She also mentions that their father had planted a peach tree, meaning they could make sweet peach blossom wine every year for the celebrations, which sounds absolutely delicious, don't you think? We go back to Yi's memory of his parents rejecting his offer to leave Penglai on New Kunlun, his mother telling him that they won't go and neither will Heng. She castigates him for putting her in harm's way during the lab explosion before walking off, leaving Yi's father to deliver another emotional blow before following her. Heng walks out from behind a tree, having eavesdropped on the whole conversation. She asks if Yi will stay for dinner, but he's confident that would result in another argument. Heng wants to congratulate Yi, despite everything, as this is the day he's promoted from the council to a full sol. He has his soul seal at this point, and has a say in the running of New Kunlun. But his mood is soured following the argument with his parents. Yi is frustrated with them, asking why they wouldn't want to escape Penglai when the rest of the population is so desperate to get aboard New Kunlun. But Heng points out there are some Taoists who think they should accept their fate and return to Penglai's soil. Yi does not have kind words for these people, but Heng is unmoved, pointing out that Taoists believe one thing, Yi believes another, neither is wrong. As usual, Yi takes this badly and shouts at her, not understanding what she's saying and just reacting like a petulant child who thinks he knows better. Despite his ranting, Heng still believes in Yi. She's absolutely confident he'll achieve his goal of curing the Tiandao and creating a paradise on New Kunlun. She wants Yi to stay for dinner, to try the wine she made last year with her big brother, but Yi has to go. He has to return to Eigong and his work. He doesn't have the time for Heng anymore. He's working against the clock. She tells him she'll keep the wine until the next time he visits. When the memory ends and we return to the present, Heng says that the batch of wine is still sealed. Yi never went back. She ponders that if the family were to sit in the yard under the peach tree drinking wine and chatting about nothing in particular, then that would be an idea of the paradise Yi was chasing. Christ, this game is sad at times. Heng can really tug on your heartstrings. Before we get further in the grotto, we take a trip back to the pavilion and Xuan tells us that Shenong is missing. This happens when you fed him all 15 poisons in the game and maxed out your health bar. Xuan tells us that some villagers turned up and talked to Shenong, who left in a hurry, telling the lad not to follow him. We find Shenong in the ramshackle village next to the spaceport. He's wounded and he's lost his left hand. The villagers are in hiding and we can see the shaman struggling to get up in the background. Shenong tells us the monsters attacked the villagers and wounded the shaman. It's down to Yi to stop them. Shenong begs us to save his people. So we get a fun little combat room where we have to deal with several waves of gradually more difficult enemies, so, enemy prioritization is a must here. As we're pretty much at the end of the game, this sequence throws multiples of the most annoying and tanky enemies we've encountered to date, and at least one mini-boss for good measure. But when the battle is over, we speak to the shaman as she reaches the end of her life, having received mortal wounds whilst protecting the children from the enemies. She once again asks Yi to stay and protect the village, enraging Shenong, who asks if that's the only idea she can think of. She keeps to her script, wanting to keep the ape men in the village, knowing the outside is dangerous, but Shenong can see the benefit and opportunities in leaving the village and dealing with the danger that it can bring. In his time with us, Shenong has come to realise that he does actually care about the other villagers and that he wants to see them thrive, and that the shaman's inaction is stifling their potential. She tells him she thought he preferred to be alone, but Shenong finally admits that he was scared. Scared of becoming weak, becoming complacent, and becoming less like the guru he was so influenced by. And finally, he admits that he needs the other ape men. He needs the companionship and community of his fellow humans. The shaman tells Shenong to take the ape men away, far away from Peach Blossom Village. He's finally realised his own potential as a leader. He's the one to take over the village and lead them to prosperity. And with that thought, she passes away. The scene then cuts to all the villagers returning and immediately asking Shenong what they should do next. He wants them to see the world, to expand their horizons beyond Peach Blossom Village or the spaceport. He tells them that he doesn't know where they will go, but that he will lead the way regardless. Yi and Shenong say their goodbyes as the new village leader starts to think of where he's going to take his people. Shenong thanks Yi for taking him in and even apologises for calling him a white-haired demon. Yi, in his most significant self-realisation, thanks him in return, saying that before Shenong and Xuan he never thought he could be friends with an ape man. And with that, Shenong's story is complete, and we've completed another task to do with the true ending. We'll see Shenong again before the end of the game, but for all intents and purposes, this is where we say goodbye. Right, back to the grotto. The 3 puzzle rooms to unlock the door I mentioned earlier are essential if you're going for the true ending, and will give us some deep lore that can be missed if you skip them. The first of these rooms is hidden way over in the eastern side of the grotto, behind a platform, a wrecking ball puzzle, and a particularly brutal wave combat encounter. These puzzles all involve statues that will rise up and attack Yi in a certain order. Each attack needs to be either parried or countered, depending on what it is, and they all have to be perfect parries. If you take any damage, miss the parry, or do an imperfect parry, the puzzle resets. This first room has 6 statues that all hurl throwing knives at you. You've got to memorise the order of them coming and react appropriately, making sure to deflect every knife back at them. Once you do, you'll unlock the sealed grave of one of Leah's great sages, and we can read the secret mural about each one. The first mural tells us about Yinji Fu, a sage who battled alongside Leah and ended up establishing the research complex that existed originally on the island of Gunlan. Leah had laid down 3 great laws as he initially came to power: the law of balance, the law of unity, and the law of wisdom, all designed to lead the Solarians to a new, more harmonious and intellectual experience. This resulted in the creation of a scientific alliance of the greatest scholars in Penglai, which was the predecessor to the Fangxi Guild. Yin Jifu was the most brilliant of these scholars and became Leah's right-hand man when the Fangxi Guild was formed. The second room involves having to memorise and parry attacks from 5 different statues in a sequence. Some had swords, some threw knives, and one had a mace that required an unbounded counter. This one took me an embarrassing amount of time to complete. I kept forgetting the sequence. The second mural tells us about another sage, Guiguzi, who was the Fangxi Guild's chief strategist who was responsible for expanding the guild's influence across Penglai, and was the one who created the plan for the unification of the 9 nations. We found out that Leah had tried to use sustainable technology as an incentive to bring all of Penglai together, but with limited success. Guiguzi was a wealthy resident of the Shang Kingdom and was able to bring everyone to the table and unify the warring kingdoms. The final room might be the most annoying of the 3. This one involves using the unbounded counter to fire back sniper shots and throwing knives from 5 different statues. Despite the challenge of this game, I never managed to perfectly nail deflecting snipers with the unbounded counter. This one took me ages to beat. On the third secret mural, we're told about the final sage, Lu Yan, who during the Turbulent Era led a team of 100 Fangxi warriors to take control of the Heoshan Sphere, the orbital cannon platform that the Jitong was building. 100 Fangxi managed to kill tens of thousands of G soldiers and destroy the satellite. We also learn a little more about the Fangxi Guild and how it combined Leah's unique fighting style with high-tech weaponry to become a deadly warrior class. Leah and Lun Yan together were undefeated in the latter end of the Turbulent Era, fighting in over 100 battles without being defeated. I don't know if you noticed, but each of these graves is empty. A hologram of the occupant is all we see of them. Now we can access the door at the bottom of the Grotto scriptures that is rumoured to hold Leah's grave, and for fuck's sake, it's a secret boss! Spirit Keeper Xixing is, what we call in the industry, a dick. This boss is the final form of the Spirit Keeper enemies that have been annoying us since we got to the Lake Yaochi ruins, and to me, one of the hardest bosses to learn in the game. His main shtick is that he teleports around the arena, produces shades to double up his attacks, and can combo Yi's entire health bar to 0 in seconds. The primary attack of his that fucked me off the most is the left to right Crimson attacks. He will slide forward with a Crimson attack in one direction, only for a shade immediately come from the other side. He does this up to 5 times, and if any of them hit you, you get stun locked half to death. He can also zone out parts of the arena with electricity balls that can just catch you by surprise. The key to beating him is to quickly watch out for the left-right Crimson attacks and use the Tai Chi kick to parry every single one. That will result in you having a decent window to lay the smackdown on him and score some huge damage. I was more satisfied beating this boss than I was beating Ji Quan. That's how annoying he was. With Xixing thoroughly defeated though, we can enter Leah's tomb. Inside we have a recording device and we can see a hologram of the inaction declaration. We see a younger Leah sat with his followers flanking him. He talks of the ending of a journey being the start of a new one. When he made this declaration, it had been 10 years since the end of the Turbulent Era, and in that time the Fangxi Guild had unified the kingdoms of Penglai and created a universal peace, but Leah believes that the pursuit of power and technology has become a new shackle upon the Solarians. We see Leah tell his people that the Fangxi Guild is to be disbanded and all their technology will be sealed off. Only technology deemed beneficial for everyone would be made available for people to use. The followers react poorly to this, but Leah continues saying that the Fangxi members will go into hiding and return to nature, seeking the Tao. The audience are incredulous at this pivot away from technology to a faith-based way of life. Leah ends with the statement that the Tao often acts through inaction. The followers start to consider leaving Kunlun as Leah closes his speech. This has gone down like a lead balloon with most of them. When we break through the wall into the final chamber, we see the 3 corpses of the great sages lying around the primordial roots Fusang, and a chest we can hack that gives us a rhizomatic bomb, an ancient weapon that has the power to raise an entire island, something that finally broke the G Kingdom but became a stain on the Fangxi Guild, implying that this is the weapon Leah used to end the war. Think along the lines of the atomic bombs dropped on Japan during the Second World War. They ended the war, but they became a stain upon history as a result. When we rest at the roots, we're taken to see Leah one final time. Leah is happy to see us before he returns to the Great Tao to become one with the universe. He asks us to humour him and let him share an old fable before he leaves. He tells a tale of a demonic dog who sympathised with the people who were being tortured by demons wandering the land, and took it upon himself to find the legendary demon-slaying sword. Along the way he acquired 3 partners, a wise old snake, a fearless tiger with boundless courage, and a charismatic demon fox who could charm any living creature. They faced trials and hardships but eventually retrieved the sword. However, the sword may have slain the demons, but peace did not prevail. The old snake had an ocean of knowledge at his disposal and lost his way in it. The tiger lost his purpose and found it by abusing his power, and the fox became jealous of the attention the dog was receiving and started plotting against the dog. They had all become new demons, so the dog had to dispose of his former comrades in arms. But as he cut each one down, he realised this didn't solve anything. He just made himself the most powerful demon alive. The implication here is that this tale is about Leah and the Great Sages. As the Origin era progressed, the 3 sages lost their virtues and started to become either corrupt, violent, or vengeful. Or all 3. Leah's decision to make the inaction declaration and seal himself and the 3 sages away to die is how he handled not only the sages but his own guilt. The fact that we find the last rhizomatic bomb in the tomb speaks volumes. Even if Leah had dealt with all 3 sages, he would still be the most powerful demon alive. He was still a demon. He had to leave too. Yi asks if this story is about Leah, but Leah counters it could be about him too. Think about it. Yi is a great warrior. Kuafu is our technologist, like Yin Jifu. Shenong is our warrior, like Lun Yan. And Xuan Xuan is our genius strategist and diplomat, like Gui Guzi. Leah's lesson is essentially that justice is not necessarily black versus white or right versus wrong. Justice is in the eye of the beholder. Yi asks what he's supposed to do, and Leah can only tell him that the answer is already in his heart. He will know what the right answer is when the time comes. Leah's time reaches an end. He bids his farewell to Yi, telling him he'll meet him again amongst the Great Tao. But before he disappears, he said he would have liked to have seen Peng Lai just one more time. And then he's gone, returned to the Great Tao like so many before him. And we have nearly everything we need for the true ending. There's just one more requirement to complete right at the end of the game. When we reach Ji's sanctum, we find the Sol writing on lore tablets, supposedly writing the ending to his own story, as he's seen with his clairvoyance. He refers to this area as his library, a place where he's been documenting events for millennia in his role as a chronicler. He says he uses the tablets to remind himself of the things worth remembering. Yi, in his impatience, interrupts and asks why Ji has been following us around. Ji simply wants to know more about us, comparing Yi to a lighthouse that shines bright in the night. There's something about Yi that just held Ji's attention. Ji then floats above the ground, his arms and legs extending as he returns to his proper form. Age means nothing to Ji. He is eternal, immortal. He has lived for many lifetimes for reasons he doesn't understand. Ji is uniquely self-absorbed. He cares not for power or legacy, and he's made no effort to save anyone as the Solarians suffered and died off. His immortality is a curse, as everyone he loved or cared about has died while he continued to live. He also says that despite it all, he lacks the courage to end his own life. Yi asks why Ji joined the council, seeing as Tianhao probably wouldn't affect him. Ji didn't want to remain on Peng Lai and suffer eternal loneliness. He wished to be amongst people for as long as he could. He mentions cryptically that he promised to protect the Grotto of Scriptures for a friend. Yi doesn't want to fight Ji. The Sol had never participated on the council, and Yi doesn't relish the idea of killing the last of the ancient Kunlun tribe, but Ji has seen the hexagrams and that they will fight and that Yi will die by his hand. He introduces himself openly as Deputy Captain of the Fangxi Guild Elite Guard, Suzhena Ji. This fight is interesting. Ji will float in the air and summon 3 hexagram orbs that will dictate his attacks. We can influence which one is selected using the Tai Chi kick on them. In the first phase, there are a few possible orbs. The whirlwind one will spawn a few waves of floating daggers that will track Yi from both directions. They can be parried away much like any other attack. The sword will have Ji dashing around on the floor, throwing out daggers over and over again. And the gourd will drop a jar on the ground that you can smash and receive either a couple of health orbs back or a couple of charges for the Azure Bow, which is nice. But he'll also drop a black hole on the ground that sucks you towards the centre of the arena. Besides that, he also has some spear attacks that can be parried, multiple knife throws, and a crimson spear thrust that you can Tai Chi kick him out of. So far, so simple. In the second phase, Ji adds a circular symbol that has him dropping a totem to the ground which sends out waves of red energy. You can destroy the totem to stop it. Then there's the black hole attack he starts the phase with. This one creates a black hole that sucks you back towards Ji, mixed with waves of energy flowing and 3 throwing knives which fly off the screen and then come back. It's a lot to internalise. After Lady Ethereal and the Fangs, Ji isn't too difficult a boss. He attacks fast, but not too many of his attacks will deal heavy damage if you screw up a parry. The main part of the battle is to try and get favourable drops from the hexagrams and then pay attention to where the throwing knives are coming from and make sure you're facing the right direction to parry them. The black hole attack in the second phase is probably the hardest part of this fight. The gravity well can cause the throwing knives to move in unpredictable ways, and you have a very short window to manage what is effectively 3 different attacks at once. When you take down G, he starts to compare us to Leah, saying our fighting style is exactly like his before going on to tell us he lied about the hexagram predictions. Yi was always going to be the one who triumphed in this fight. But if he told Yi that he was going to win, would Yi have tried his hardest? G then starts to age rapidly, his body collapsing. He reminisces on all he's seen, of rivers and mountains forming across Penglai, the first time the Donghuang bells rang, cities lost and ravaged by time, everything that has come and passed into the Tao. When he passes away, we take a lock of his hair, which will become important shortly. Notably though, there weren't any Tianhou flowers coming from his corpse. Ji was either never infected or he was immune. In his soulscape, we see a young Ji being worshipped as the guardian of life and the master of time. We see him at the scene of Jitong's suicide after the Ji Kingdom lost the war. He was present as Leah retreated into the primordial roots Fusang after the inaction declaration. He was experimented on by Eigong as she researched immortality, the Tianhou flowers on her desk as she works with Ji's life essence. In the final memory, we see Ji's corpse laying in front of his archive of his memories, having received wholeness within the Tao. Everything he learned over a millennia of life now taken back to the Great Tao. We claim his soul seal, which is the character Gui, which signifies insight. That's 8 of our 9 targets down, only one more to go after, Eigong. We return to the pavilion, we bring Ji's hair to Abacus. He needed genetic material from an ancient Solarian to synthesize a way to kill the mutated abominations once and for all. The analysis confirms that the mutated genetics are nearly a perfect match for Ji's cells. He's developed an add-on for our talismans that will take them out. Perfect. This also confirms our earlier suspicions that the mutations were Eigong's fault. We've seen that she's experimented with Ji's DNA and the Tianhou to find a source of immortality, and we saw the results of her serum with Fuxi. She needs to be stopped. Before we leave to confront her though, we have time for one last game with Xuan. Throughout the story, Yi has been teaching him how to play Qiangkun, a strategic board game similar to Go. Over their time together playing the game, Yi has tried to impart his knowledge of strategy, rational thought and scientific consideration to the boy, but each game ends with Xuan teaching Yi something about restraint or one of Leah's pillars of Taoism. In their final game together, Xuan tells Yi that he's overheard the things he talks about with Kuafu, Shenong or Abacus, and asks why he's not been allowed to help on Yi's quest for revenge. At this point, Yi is starting to lose hope. He knows things have gotten so bad on New Kunlun that he can't save the Solarians. All he can do is stop Eigong, and he's pretty convinced he's not going to survive the endeavour. Yi says he's starting to regret leaving Penglai, that he envies those who stayed behind. Xuan, ever the optimist, points out that if Yi had never left Penglai, then he would just be alone, with no one, no parents, living alone in the Peach Blossom village like he was before he met Yi. By this point in the game, Xuan's worked out that the Solarians harvested his parents for the Eternal Cauldron, but he doesn't blame Yi for it. They go on to talk about what would make a life meaningful. Yi can't think of anything, but when he asks Xuan to give him his thoughts, the boy talks about days with perfect weather where they slept all day on the grass, or a time when they had a big fight over a stolen fish, or a night when Xuan fell asleep during one of Yi's stories and Yi just kept telling it to the morning. Yi notes that these are all his memories, but then Xuan comes out with this absolutely incredible line, quote, "I think the meaning of life is pieced together by a mix of happy, angry, and even sad moments," end quote. The meaning of life is living it. We're about at the culmination of Yi's arc here, and he's starting to understand what life is actually for. Not the pursuit of advancement or accolades, not revenge, not hatred or betrayal. Life is about living. It's what Heng was trying to impart in him when he had his head stuck in books as a child, when he was too busy being a scientist to play with her, when he nearly killed her and actually killed himself when his experiment went wrong. He missed out on living life. It's only since he met Xuan and started this journey of revenge that he's come to terms with living a life. Outside of his quest, he's made friends, he's bonded with Xuan, he's had moments where he could relax and enjoy the company of his companions. For a very brief time, he has lived a life. This is also the first time that Xuan beats Yi at Qiangkun. Yi tells him he can find his next opponent, but Xuan's not interested in that. He just wants to play for fun with Yi. Right, dry your eyes. Wipe away the tears, we've got some revenge to finish. We're off to the research centre to confront Eigong. Oh, can you feel it? Culmination of a journey. As soon as we reach the first root node in the research centre, Kuafu calls us, telling us he feels something is off. He asks if we know about the Dust Guardians, who are the caretakers of New Kunlun. Originally they were supposed to be in hibernation in shifts, being awoken periodically to maintain the core systems of the island during its long journey. Most of the island systems are automated, but Yi created that automation, and after he confronted her and separated from the council, Eigong believed he could have tampered with the automation. So after limiting the scope and reach of AI systems like Abacus, Eigong instigated the Dust Guardians, all of whom report directly to her. Corfu tells us that when he woke up at the start of the game, he tried to contact the Dust Guardians and couldn't reach a single one. It's as if the organisation had ceased to be. Sort of explains why parts of the island are falling apart, really. The research centre is decrepit. It's practically ruined as the Tianhou mutations have started to take over. Most surfaces are covered in growth or some form of death and decay. The upper lobby of the area is particularly overgrown with Tianhou mutations. We have to dispatch 3 huge tendrils of it to be able to progress down to the lower levels where Eigong is hiding. As we progress, we find a diary entry from one of the Dust Guardians. It details a Guardian attempting to relieve his senior officer back to hibernation, only to discover the hibernation machines were killing machines. Funny that. He witnessed the mutations and other test subjects, and as we've moved around this area, we've seen hibernation pods with open lids, which I think are what he's talking about. The medibed in the background of this room is covered in blood, and I think that the Dust Guardian died here. After we break the tendrils and drop through the floor, we can head down to the lower levels. Down here, the corridors are dark and mutations are everywhere. It's really fucking creepy down here. This is also our point of no return, so if you're playing along, make sure you mop up anything you've missed before you head further down. We pass by tanks containing mutated Solarians, all trying to break out as soon as we move past them. We can also see in the background plenty of already smashed open tanks, which does not bode well. As we descend, we're going to find a collection of terminals that we can hack containing Eigong's notes and logs on her experiments, so prepare for some big lore drops here. The first log is Eigong observing the Tianhou virus as it first develops, realising that it will spread across all of Penglai, leaving no one alive. In the chaos though, the Tiandao Council, which is the full name of the council, had managed to manoeuvre itself and play politics enough to take power. Eigong had taken enough power and support to bring back the Fangxi technology that Leah had banished centuries before. She's resolute in her need to find a cure to prove that science is the only hope for the Solarians. The second log is from 2 years later, talking about the first time she encountered Yi, the day of the explosion that killed him. She observed not only the primordial roots regenerating his damaged body, but a symbiosis between his Solarian cells and the genetic materials from the roots. Weirdly, for someone who's so determined to prove that science is the only hope for the species, Eigong wonders out if she's been blessed with a gift from the heavens for her research. Using the Mystic Nymph, we can unlock a secret log in this first terminal too. It opens 2 hidden jars that have cats in them. This hidden log was recorded 5 years after Eigong met Yi. She talks about her frustration that every avenue of her research results in a dead end. One of her experiments involved isolating the Tianhou gene from the Solarian embryo, which resulted in her creating normal cats. It seems that the Tianhou virus and the Solarians are made for each other. Removing the genetic marker that the Tianhou attacks gives you a regular house cat. This is also about the time that Yi developed the Eternal Cauldron, and Eigong, believing that she may be out of time, wants to take the risk on it and give her more time to find a cure. At the second terminal, we have another 2 logs. The first of these logs is 12 years after the Eternal Cauldron kicked off, and we can see Eigong observing G being experimented on. Right before New Kunlun is launched, Eigong believes that G might provide a method of eternal life for the Solarians, rather than the primordial roots. She believed that using G cells she could not only develop a cure for the Tianhou, but also a cure for death itself, and a serum to create true immortality. This is the point where Eigong is broken from Yi, as she specifically mentions the discovery of G needs to be kept from him. It needs to be kept a secret so she can work on immortality without interruption. The second log is dated in the second year of the Foundation era, which is what Eigong calls everything from when New Kunlun is launched. She had a prototype for the Tianhou cure at this point, and she believes she was ready for testing on Solarians. Testing on Solarians with their long lifespan takes a long time, but the Eternal Cauldron had given that to her, meaning that the credit still goes to Yi for his invention. The third terminal has 4 logs for us, and the specimen tanks all feature different forms of the mutation. The first log is 37 years into the New Kunlun voyage. Eigong believed that the serum was working, even though she wasn't sure if people could be fully cured of the Tianhou. She had been experimenting with the Dust Guardians. They all showed signs of suppressed Tianhou growth, but some had already started to develop mutations. And not just any mutations, but loss of sanity and violent behaviour on top. They were already starting to become dangerous creatures. Her only real thought in it seemed to be for further observation. The second log is from 125 years into the journey. Eigong recorded that constantly waking up from the soulscape was having negative effects on her body, and that the mutated Solarians were exhibiting incredible abilities. She noted that because the Tiandao has some genetic data from the primordial roots, some of the mutants had been able to infect and devour parts of the roots, which she believes is what makes them immortal. The next log is from year 259 of the Foundation era. Here, Eigong had observed that the mutants were starting to exhibit a collective consciousness and were able to transfer information and coordinate as a group alarmingly quickly. The final log from this term is from year 351. The clinical tests on the Tiandao serum had proved to be a failure, with no observable changes observed in the Solarians. 90% of those who received the serum didn't recover, and the other 10% mutated. Eigong appears to have lost hope here. After circumventing a locked door, we find Eigong's chamber and enter her soulscape, but her memory shards are blanked out. We can't see anything. Instead, we find Eigong herself. Yi confronts her, but the conversation is oddly friendly, a disciple talking to his mentor, until she ruminates that if she could have convinced him of her way of thinking, things would have turned out differently. Only for Yi to counter that if he could go back in time, he'd behead her. Steady on, lad. She's been watching our bloody revenge journey and claims not to recognise Yi, that he's changed from the idealistic young scientist who invented the cauldron and brought hope to the people. Yi isn't having it. That hope was based on lies, and people have suffered because Eigong pressed on with the project and because Lady Ethereal didn't share that the soulscape could drive people insane. Yi tells her that she betrayed everything she believed. Eigong doesn't see it that way though, instead believing that the problem should be solved with a practical manner. The ends justify the means. She asks what we plan to do with the Soul Seal and whether we expect the virus to just disappear, or if we're going to go back to Penglai to die there. Yi answers that there's more important things than survival, which Eigong flat out rejects as a concept. Eigong believes that she's the only person who can make things right, who can cure the Solarians and guarantee their survival. She asks Yi if he's acting on behalf of all Solarians or for his own vengeance against her, but Yi doesn't answer. He challenges her to a fight instead, but seems to have forgotten that we're in her soulscape. She makes the rules in here. She reaches out her hand and slams Yi to the floor, seizing control of his nervous system remotely. She takes the 8 soul seals we've collected from us, nearly giving her full control of New Kunlun to do whatever she wants to advance her immortality agenda. She planned this further betrayal and Yi has finally put it together. Eigong says that through the many accidents of her experiment, she now understands the purpose of everything. All the events leading to this moment, including her violent separation from Yi, appears to have worked in her favour. And with that, she leaves the soulscape and Yi alone trapped in it. He sits in the darkness until he hears Heng call out to him.
Kin?
This is Yi's memory of Heng telling him that she can't leave on New Kunlun. Yi believes she's been stupid, but she's adamant that she's serious and she's going to stay. He yells at her that she's going to die if she stays, but she's unmoved, saying she can't imagine her life ending anywhere but Penglai. Yi tries to convince her to leave with him, but she has made her peace with her mortality, wanting to end her journey within the Great Tao. Yi didn't understand. He lashes out again, shouting at Heng, asking if she doesn't want to live, but she loses her temper, finally shouting back that she does want to live. She wants to spend the rest of her days with her brother. However, she didn't see that running away would help. Life and death are interlinked after all. She reminded Yi that the roots prolonged his life after the accident, but Yi claimed that it was Eigong that actually saved his life, still stubbornly sticking to his scientific principles. He pushed her away, saying that she betrayed him and throwing his care for her back in her face. But Heng, bless her, stood up for herself, countering that he never actually asked what she wanted in life. He would just assume her needs and assume they would align with his. It was never about what Heng wanted, it was always about what Yi wanted. This stops Yi in his tracks. He clearly never expected Heng to stand up for herself and push back like this. It doesn't last long, and he pushes her away again, this time getting mean about it. Heng tried to apologise in the moment, but Yi rejected her, and he made one last declaration that he would visit one more time before New Kunlun launches, and if she was still adamant about staying on Penglai to die, then he would never have had a little sister. He would rather forget her than accept her dying on Penglai by choice. Jesus fucking Christ, Yi. The memory ends with Heng walking away, saying that no one was at fault for the way things turned out, everyone just made different choices. But Yi never came back for her. He didn't make the final visit he promised. The memory is shifted to Yi's own guilt in the soulscape. He tries to tell Heng that he didn't leave her behind. He tries to reach out to her as she fades away, reiterating that no one was at fault as the shadows of the souls he's killed fade into the background behind him. This final lament for the fallen souls is their acknowledgement of their hubris. They built their promise of a cure for Tianhou and the endurance of the Solarian species on a foundation of lies, false hope and the achievements of the Fangxi. They all failed their original goals, caused great suffering to innocent Solarians and the humans they've used to fuel their research, and ultimately prolonged the inevitable collapse of the Solarian species. They started believing that as souls they were the best and brightest of the species, the peak of Solarian culture, only to look into the sunset of their people and realise they were only souls, their arrogance and vanity resulting in inevitable extinction. From the blackness, Xuan Xuan's voice brings Yi back to consciousness and pulls us out of the soulscape. He desperately asks us where we are, saying the Four Seasons Pavilion has been attacked. The monsters have returned and we need to get the fuck out of here as quickly as possible to save our friends. We have access to the final terminal hosting Eigong's logs now, so despite our hurry, we can get some final lore from the research centre. There's 5 logs to go over here, so strap in. The first log was recorded at some point hundreds of years into the journey. Eigong has given up keeping track of dates. She's been going over her logs to see if she missed anything, but really she's forgotten why she was researching immortality in the first place. The second log has her becoming enraged that she can't find the answer she's looking for. She still can't find the answer she's looking for, and she's adamant she must have missed something, yet still determined to save all the Solarians and make all of her sacrifices worth it. The third log starts with an epiphany, that Eigong has been looking at the problem all wrong, that the mutations her serum caused are the key to immortality. The fourth log is corrupted entirely. The final log is Eigong's understanding. She's come to see the Tianhou not as a disaster, but as a gift to the Solarians. She's come to believe that the mutations are the next stage in Solarian evolution, that the abominations she's created are where the species should be going. She's going to lead the Solarians to immortality by mutating everyone, by turning everyone into these monsters. Eigong has become a victim of her own tunnel vision. Her entire time researching a cure for the Tianhou has been within the context of her original immortality research, not to actually cure the virus in the first place. She's never looked at curing Tianhou outside of immortality, and the 5 centuries of toiling away by herself has resulted in her believing that the cure is the mutation itself. It's time to bust out of here, but not before the mutants give chase in a tight corridor. It's our last major locked-in combat section. It's something of an auto-scroller. As the camera comes in tight, we have to survive waves of clone soldiers and the mutants who keep breaking out of the tanks in the background. Once we're done here, the climb back to the top of the facility is swarming with mutants and we have to fight our way through. On the way back up, we also find one last terminal with a sample of Tiandao flower in the background and 3 more logs to listen to. These ones are all really early in Eigong's process. The first is log 0001. This has Eigong recording that she has dedicated herself to her immortality project on the instruction of the council themselves. She's being funded by Fuxi and Nuwa, and she's feeling pressure to provide results no matter what. The second log is 10 years later, and Eigong has made a breakthrough fusing the primordial roots regeneration cells with Solarian cells. She was full of celebration at this, believing this to be a turning point in her quest for immortality. The final log is from 2 years later and everything has gone to shit. She notes that all the test subjects have rejected her immortality drug and died. The cause of their deaths? During the gene editing process, she accidentally created the Tianhou virus and now she has no idea how to stop it. The flowers that sprout from the corpses of the infected blossom and spread spores to propagate and infect others. It was all Eigong's fault. Her single-minded mission to make Solarians immortal ended up dooming the entire species to a slow and painful extinction. Once we've escaped the research centre, we have to make our way back up to the pavilion manually. There's no warping allowed here, so it's a big rush back to save our friends. When we arrive, the place has been destroyed, everything is ruined, the backdrop has malfunctioned, the lights are off. All of Xuanxuan's home comforts and handmade decorations have been ruined too. The bastards! If you don't complete Chiyu's quest to rebuild his brother, you will see him lying dead on the first floor as you run past. Abacus is in a sorry state. It looks like whoever attacked tried to take him out completely. His speech is glitched and broken, and he's suffered critical damage. Thankfully, Xuanxuan and Kuafu hid in the panic room in the back of Abacus's area, so they're safe and we're all reunited. Kuafu tells us it was Eigong and her personal guards who destroyed the place. She came to take our soul seal from our vital sanctum, so now she has all 10 of them. She can take complete control of New Kunlun and make use of the council code to do whatever she wants. Abacus tries to do a situational analysis, but errors out. His central processing core is 97% damaged. In machine terms, he's dying. Xuanxuan asks if Abacus can be fixed, but Kuafu delivers the bad news. Not even he can fix this. No one can. Xuanxuan asks if it's all his fault, and Abacus actually comforts him. The AI that's about to shut down permanently shows empathy for the boy and reassures him. Abacus signs off with a really beautiful quote. Quote, "The winds of fortune blow every which way, no one escapes calamity, not even if they happen to be the world's most powerful computer." End quote. Yi thanks Abacus for everything and we watch as he shuts down. I'm crying about a computer dying. Damn it, Red Candle Games, you got me again. We meet Kuafu back in his workshop to have one final chat to confirm that we're heading down the path of the true ending. Kuafu is understandably hopeless right now. Their home is destroyed, Eigong has absolute power, they've lost Abacus, and New Kunlun is crawling with mutants. It couldn't look any worse right now. Yi points out the Solarians aren't the only living creatures on the island, and Kuafu asks if we want to save the Apemen. We're given two choices here, save the Apemen or save the Solarians. If you're chasing the true ending, then you need to choose for the Apemen to survive. If you pick the Solarians, you'll get the standard or bad ending. But we're going for the true ending here. Yi tells Kuafu that they need to be returned to the Pale Blue Planet. They need to go home. This course of action, Yi ruminates, is what Heng would have done. He's finally coming around to her way of thinking. Kuafu points out that it would doom the Eternal Cauldron, effectively wiping out the entire Solarian species. Kuafu asks if the Apemen deserve to live more than the Solarians, and Yi counters that he thinks they'll have a chance to have better lives. Yi points out that this conversation is moot if Eigong can't be stopped, but Kuafu is always one step ahead and he has a new toy for us. Do you remember that rhizomatic bomb we took from Leah's grave? Well, Kuafu can make it into an arrow for the Azure bow that can be used as a last resort to tear apart the world. As Yi is giving Kuafu instructions to get the Apemen away from New Kunlun, Xuanxuan interrupts. He's adamant he's not going, he refuses to be taken away from Yi. Yi tells him it's no longer safe on New Kunlun and that the only way that he can be safe is to leave with the rest of the Apemen. The two of them start arguing, Xuanxuan saying that he wants to go to Penglai with Yi, Yi telling him that's not a place he should go. Yi tries to push Xuanxuan away, telling him he really doesn't know him, but Xuanxuan isn't an idiot. He lists off what he knows about Yi, from how he likes his food to how loud he snores and how intelligent Yi is. He's learned so much from Yi about science, art, culture, food, and expanded his horizons beyond the Peach Blossom Village. More importantly, he knows that after his parents were harvested, Yi was the only one who would show him any love or affection. He is adamant that he cannot lose Yi. Yi begins to confess that he's not a good person. He confesses his part of the Eternal Cauldron project, and that it's his technology that killed Xuanxuan's parents. Of course, Xuanxuan already knew that, the kid's a freaking genius and already pieced it together. He saw the killing machines when Shenong guided him out the village to the harvesting facility. Yi's confession is partly to convince Xuan to leave, but also to partly reconcile his guilt for what he's done to the Apemen. But Xuan sees Yi differently. He sees Yi as he is now, not as he was. He sees the Yi that lives with him in the now, a kind, brave soul who's protected him and taught him so much of the history of the Solarians, and given him the opportunity to learn so many new skills and experience so many things that none of his people have ever seen. More importantly, he knows that the Yi stood in front of him would never hurt him. This moves Yi. He relents. He promises to pick Xuan up from Earth when things settle down on New Kunlun. It's a lie, of course. Yi knows it's unlikely he's going to survive this, but this simple lie is enough to convince Xuan to leave New Kunlun with the rest of the Apemen. Before we go to Eigong, we head to the docks to see off the Apemen. Kwafu points out that none of the ships that the Apemen are being loaded on can take off without a Solarian at the helm, which of course Yi had considered, and he expects Kwafu to leave New Kunlun with the Apemen. Kwafu is naturally annoyed at Yi for the expectation, but he's going to do it anyway because he wants Xuan to have a real home and a real shot at life. He's finally come around on the boy. It's only taken the whole damn game. But he does want to go back to Penglai with Yi, even if there's only the two of them left. Shenong is happy to have Kwafu along. The Apemen still treat him like a god, so he doesn't have to work so hard to keep them in line. The man's a testament to laziness, and I'm here for it. Xuan doesn't want to talk to Yi. He's mad at him. He starts to cry. He doesn't want to go, and he's not going to make it easy on us. Yi brings Xuan close and gives him the Mystic Nymph. He tells the boy how important the Mystic Nymph is to him and asks him to take care of it for a little while so he can come and collect it later. Yi also offers to take Xuan to the ocean on the pale blue planet when he comes back for the nymph. They pinky promise on it, and Xuan agrees to leave with Kwafu and the other Apemen. After they all say their goodbyes, Yi watches from a viewport and another call comes in from Heng. She expresses a small amount of regret for staying on Penglai and not coming with Yi. She feels so lonely when she thinks about dying alone without her brother. She knows the messages will take hundreds of years to catch up with New Kunlun and she'll never receive a reply from her brother, but it doesn't matter to her. She pieces together fragments of Yi from her memories. This is Heng's final message. This is the first one Yi is actively listening to when it arrives. The others he's listened to in sort of like a voicemail. This is the first one he's listened to as it arrives. She's sure that Yi has been successful and he's celebrating by now. Yi says he was going to pick her up, that Eigong stopped him and he would wake up centuries later. She asks if he'll still remember her if he has a new family, or if he'll miss the days they spent together. She composes herself and tells Yi that her time has come, that this is the final message, but she's not scared. She's going to return to the tower before him, stepping ahead to return to the earth and heaven at once. She wants him to promise to tell her his story when they eventually meet again in the Great Tower. Heng says goodbye. Yi finally says his goodbye to his beloved sister. And now Yi is truly alone. Excuse me, I'm going to need a minute. Right, we all back? We're ready to go? Okay, let's go fuck up the final boss. The bridge to the central control room at the top of the primordial roots is now open, allowing us to finally confront Eigong. When we arrive at the council room, we see that Eigong has already used the 10 seals, and she's running a program to unlock the core of the primordial roots, but for some reason the encryption has failed, which buys us some time to stop her. There is a terminal here allowing us to review a few of the council proceedings from the past. The first recording has Yi presenting the idea of the eternal cauldron to the council. At this point he's new, and we can see he doesn't have the respect of some of the other souls yet. He's still young and idealistic, believing the eternal cauldron is the best course of action to give the council the time to cure the Tiandao virus. He believed he was able to fix the idea of hibernation thanks to Lady Ethereal's Soulscape software, fixing the shortcomings of previous attempts to develop long-term hibernation technology. We also catch the first time that Lady Ethereal lied about how well her technology worked, telling the council that her test subjects all woke up safely and satisfied with their dreams, rather than losing their minds and becoming violent. The one concern she brings up is the need for computing power, but Yi knows that Gao Mang has a solution to that. Her previous research into Jiangxi soldiers confirmed that wiring up brains in series could create an immensely powerful biological computer. The seed of the idea is sown. The second meeting has Yi bringing up the Heotian Sphere, the Death Star weapon that the Ji Kingdom had built during the Turbulent era. Whilst it had been disabled as a weapon by Lear and his Fangxi guild, it was still functioning as a telescope and had discovered the pale blue planet, which contained intelligent enough life to provide the brains required to make the Eternal Cauldron work. Lady Ethereal questions the ethics of using the Apemen to power the cauldron, but Gao Mang rebuffs her, saying that primitive species tend to wipe themselves out, so it's better for the species if the Solarians cultivate them instead. Eigong points out, however, that the pale blue planet is 500 light-years away, which should be an insurmountable distance, not to mention how would they build a colony vessel or procure enough supplies for a journey of that length. Yi posits a radical idea. Why not take Kunlun Island from Pengli and launch it into space with everyone on it and warping to the pale blue planet through a wormhole? The primordial roots would supply enough power to keep Kunlun going until it reached the solar system, where it could recharge using solar power from our sun. It's just crazy enough to work, but it's a one-way trip. It wouldn't take long to reach the pale blue planet, but it would take at least 500 years to return back to Pengli. It's also worth noting that Ji isn't at any of these meetings, supporting Yi's surprise when he worked out who he was back in the Grotto of Scriptures. The final log is just Eigong and Yi. She's dressed the same as she is in the opening cutscene, so this is clearly right before she kills Yi off before launching New Kunlun. They're arguing. Eigong is asking why Yi won't hear her out, and Yi is throwing around accusations, calling her a perpetrator. She claims to be speaking on behalf of the other souls, and Yi feels like he's being kept in the dark. Yi had worked out that Eigong was the one responsible for the Tianhou virus, and this is what caused his split from the council. He's angry, accusing her of murdering everyone, of murdering his parents, of sealing Heng's fate. The rest of the conversation is corrupted. But we're now free to confront Eigong and stop her plans once and for all. We reach the pinnacle of the primordial roots, and as Eigong has managed to get the decryption process started, a huge orb sits above us, the roots sucking energy from it. She is surprised that we're here. Or rather surprised that Yi escaped from her soulscape. Eigong believes she's going to usher in a whole new world, a better world, but Yi doesn't care. He needs her to stop. We need her to stop. Eigong tells us that we're about to witness the liberation of Fusang, allowing it to facilitate immortality amongst the Solarians. Of course, her idea of immortality at this point is the mutations. She wants to infect the primordial roots and spread the Tianhou mutations to all Solarians. She's unmoved by Yi's accusations that she's gone insane. She knows in her own heart that the mutations will ascend Solarians to the next stage of evolution. For the record, I agree with Yi. She's fucking lost it. Eigong believes that Solarians have always been victims of fate, and she believes that in this moment she can break the species out of the cycle of life and death and create a realm of the immortal. Yi says that he'll stop her, which she thinks is a cruel thing to say, that by trying to stop her, Yi is cursing the Solarians to death. She tells him that no mentor can bear to end their students' lives, and she doesn't want to do it a second time. The primordial roots Fusang is fully decrypted now, so it's time to fight to the death. I'm going to say this up front. Eigong is a dick. Capital D-I-C-K. As she is Yi's mentor, she has a lot of the same moves, but plenty more on top. Most notably, she can slap talismans on Yi, causing him to freeze in place and take a huge amount of damage if you don't get the Tai Chi kick right and deflect the hit. Her combos are faster and contain more hits than any boss we've fought so far, Ji Quan included. She can also teleport around the arena, dodge faster than we can, and she has 3 different Crimson attacks in her first phase. The first is her talisman attack, which can be deflected with the Tai Chi kick. The other 2 are an energy explosion and a downward slash that can both be deflected with the unbound counter. On the downward slash, if you miss the counter though, she'll dash through you and leave 3 slashes in the air behind her that you need to deflect. That's just the first phase. In the second phase, she adds a series of energy waves that start with the Crimson wave you either need to dodge through or jump over, 2 white ones you can deflect, and then a 4th one that, again, you need to dodge through or jump over. It's an absolute nightmare to handle. And on top of that, her previous Crimson attacks add more flames to the floor, and she increases the rate of her combos. There's also a second variant of it where she does the opening Crimson wave, the 2 deflectable ones, and then she follows up with the dash through you and the quick triple slash in the air, just to keep you on your toes. She also expands her combo attacks with 2 new combos that knock you up into the air. The first combo has her knock you into the air then slap you back down to the ground, which she then follows up with a flaming slash down at you. The second one starts with you being thrown into the air followed by an energy orb attack. Both can be handled with the unbound counter, but you've got to be quick. These also both follow up talisman attacks too, so you need to deflect the talisman, then deflect the hit into the air, the hit down to the ground, and then do an unbounded counter before you get an opportunity to damage her. The length of her combos just keeps getting longer and longer. If you aren't going for the true ending, beating her second phase is where you end up. She dies and we're victorious. But if you're going for the true ending, well fuck you, there's more fight to come. Now initially I could only beat her on story mode, such is the utter clusterfuck that is this third phase if you're not prepared for it. But after losing my ending footage through a hard drive failure and having to re-record it all, I went back and learned the fight properly and eventually managed to get through it. It took me 7 hours to do, and even then my final fight isn't particularly clean. However, my good friend Darkfire had some footage of him beating this phase far cleaner than I could, so you're going to see some of his gameplay mixed in here. Go sub to his channel, the link is in the description. The third phase is a further escalation of the second phase. This starts with the Transmutation bursting out of Eigong's back and her letting go of all pretense of sanity. She powers up and immediately disappears, coming back to deliver 3 parryable hits from off screen, followed by a crimson attack you really need to avoid, all in the space of about a second and a half. These attacks come so quickly that reacting to them is more of an instinct thing rather than a skill based reaction. As soon as she disappears you need to be mashing the deflect button and hoping for the best. When you see the red indicator for the crimson hit you need to do a double jump to avoid it. If you mistime these parries, you'll be taking huge damage and you'll risk being back at the start of the fight. She'll follow up this ridiculous combo with either a talisman attack into one of the combos from the second phase, or a dash into the 3 mid-air deflects. This is also on top of everything else she's thrown at you so far. Surviving just the first 5 seconds of this phase is an achievement to be proud of. My advice for surviving this fight? Patience. You'll see from my footage I'm not chasing hits or trying to trade hits with her. I'm waiting for every possible moment to do damage or to slap a talisman on her. Eigong is so aggressive you don't have much room to maneuver, so you have to wait for every opportunity to do any damage. The Hedgehog Jade is essential for this fight in my opinion. This one converts perfect parries to internal damage for her, meaning that so long as you're nailing the parries, she's still in a position to take huge amounts of damage when you can hit her with a talisman. She's not really doing anything we haven't seen before in the game, but Eigong demands absolutely perfect execution. If you can make it through her first 2 phases without taking damage, then you're as set up as you can be for the third phase. This is a long fight that will absolutely test your resolve and your mental stamina. Learning the third phase especially is so difficult because that initial attack volley hits so quickly it's impossible to react to it on the first few attempts, sending you right back to the start of the fight. Once you do nail it though, my god what a fight! It's spectacular! I found myself entering something akin to a flow state when I was getting close to beating her. I found that during the first 2 phases I was acting on instinct rather than concentrating. Defeating Eigong was akin to defeating Sword Saint Ishin in Sekiro. By the time I'd beaten her, I didn't realise I was anywhere near close to winning. I wasn't concentrating on a health bar, I was just concentrating on executing perfectly. So be patient, take your time, you can do it. If you didn't pursue the true ending, once you've beaten Eigong's second phase, she concedes that Yi has improved as a warrior, that his determination to defeat her was clear in each of his considered movements. As her life slips away, she says that the fate of the Solarians is in Yi's hands. Yi returns to the council chamber and activates the soul seal, setting a course to take New Kunlun back to Penglai. There's a quiet serenity to this moment, of Yi by himself going back to a home he'll no longer recognise with no one left. We then fade in on Yi sat in a field of white Tianho flowers, at the memorial where his parents are buried, praying silently to a flower which may or may not be Heng's. He walks to a transport sat in the water, giving us a view of the serene pink and purple hues of Penglai across the lake. The transport takes him past vast towers of vital sanctums holding the surviving Solarians in suspended animation, and then past a still functioning computer filled with the harvested brains of Apemen, keeping the eternal cauldron running until a cure for Tianhao can be found. When the transport lands, Yi walks past his own vital sanctum and he's greeted by 3 Apemen, 2 children and 1 adult. One of the children is Shanshanth, the 3 of them wear Solarian robes. Yi settles down to play Qiankun with the younger child whilst the adult reports on the status of the soulscape. Personally, I don't like this ending. The whole thrust of Yi's character arc is his resolution of the 2 warring sides of his personality. At the start of the game, he's single-minded in his desire for revenge. For Eigong's betrayal, for the corruption of his life's work by the incompetent, vainglorious Tiandao Council. He's racked with guilt for how he treated Heng, and he believes himself to be a terrible person for the horrors that have been inflicted on the Solarians and the Soulscapes. But by the end of the game, he's been on a journey. Through Shanshan, he's learned patience and restraint. He's had his worst impulses challenged by a precocious child, and he's had several epiphanies on his behaviour. He finally confronted his guilt over how he left things with Heng and came to some sort of peace, or at least an acceptance over her death. It's not explicit in the text, but I think there's an element of relief that she didn't suffer the horrors he witnessed on New Kunlun. The Home Sweet Home ending arrests Yi's development as a character. Despite everything he's discovered about himself, about the Council or the Tau, he returns to Penglai to sit in a sort of waking stasis of his own. He's brought the Apemen further away from their true home, and they appear to be serving him, or at least working to keep the slumbering Solarians alive, using the brains of other Apemen to keep them in suspended animation. Yi seems checked out, like he's not there at all as he plays Qiankun with the child. To me, this feels like a wasted ending. It's not a bad ending, it's not a good ending, it's just an ending. But it's one that feels deeply unsatisfying given everything we've been through to get here. Thank God then for the true ending. After we defeat Eigong's 3rd phase, she compliments him on his skills, but then asks why Yi isn't scared of everything ending. Yi is honest with her. He is scared, but he's learned to accept failure. With a smirk, she leaps into the air, landing above the now decrypted primordial roots. She brings her sword to her neck and glares down at Yi and thanks him for joining her at the end of the Foundation era, taunting him that even he can't stop history. Eigong cuts her own throat, triggering her full Tianhao mutation, which collapses into the primordial roots. The corruption is immediate as we see the mutation spread through New Kunlun in minutes, reaching every part of the island. We see some of the other souls, the now corrupted roots spreading into their corpses and taking them as part of a glorious whole. Notably, Fuxi and Nuwa's party is still ongoing, despite their death in this new horror. They really did party hard. The roots are slowly tearing the island apart as they grow exponentially. Yi stands in front of this new abomination at the top of the island as it continues to grow. He calls Kwafu to find out how far away the colony ship with the ape men is, and he's satisfied that they're far enough away. Yi knows what he has to do. He has to destroy the primordial roots and New Kunlun. Detonating the rhizomatic bomb is the only way to end this nightmare once and for all and allow Kunlun, all the souls aboard, and Yi himself to peacefully return to nature. Yi says his goodbyes to his old friend Kwafu, and then asks to speak to Shan Shan. He does the right thing by the boy, telling him that he won't be able to pick him up after all, but he asks him to promise to live well on the pale blue planet, even if he's alone. He tells Shan Shan that he's the smartest kid he's ever met. Shan Shan won't accept that Yi isn't coming back. He thinks Yi is throwing him away. He asks why Yi would save him if he's only going to discard him later. We reach the final moment of Yi's character development as he says, quote, "You were the one who saved me," end quote. He tells the boy that he's grateful for all the time that they got to spend together, that Shan Shan is the one who truly helped Yi to wake up and see what life means, and even given him a sliver of hope for the world. As Shan Shan cries, Yi signs off with a quote from Heng. "Life and death are one. When the end comes, we'll just return to the heaven and earth." Shan Shan asks what he's going to do when he misses him, and Yi simply replies that he'll be a part of Shan Shan for all eternity. Yi ends the call and prepares for what he needs to do. The monstrous orb at the top of the primordial roots opens up as the giant eye stares Yi down. Yi stares back up at it with a certain serenity to him. He summons the azure bow to his hand, draws back on it, charging up the rhizomatic arrow, and he closes his eyes. In his mind's eye, he sees Heng standing in the distance, waiting for him in a field. They're within sight of each other once again. She smiles and opens her hand, gesturing for him to join her, and Yi opens his eyes. We see Kwafu and Shan Shan on the ship looking back at New Kunlun, the first time we're seeing the island from the outside. There's a flash of white light followed by an almighty explosion that tears the island apart. Shan Shan cries inconsolably, knowing that Yi is gone for good and will have to start his life over again without his best friend. After the credits, we get a scene on Earth. The ice is starting to melt and a green shoot is growing from the ground. We see Shan Shan looking at it, and then we pan out to see the surviving ape men and Kwafu as the sun rises over Earth, the Ice Age over, and the ape men ready to build lives for themselves on a planet they've never set foot on. And that's it. That's 9 souls. And when you get to the main menu once you've beaten this ending, the backdrop will have changed to show a human settlement, as primitive man gets another chance to get started on Earth. I know this video's been huge and I don't want to keep going on, but after finishing the game twice, spending 3 months writing the script, I hope you'll indulge me in some final thoughts. 9 Souls is an incredible achievement in storytelling, in a genre that typically doesn't do story very well. Most Metroidvanias either exist with a slight surface level narrative, such as the Metroid games, obtuse and twisting narratives that the player needs to decode, such as Blasphemous or Salt and Sanctuary, or, more typically, absolute bollocks like Castlevania and its many clones. The fact that I've been able to write a video this long, just documenting the events, dialogue and lore of this game should tell you what a monumental effort Red Candle Games put into this game. But it's not just a voluminous amount of content, the story is good. The characters are well written and fleshed out. Most of the characters are based on mythical figures that are important in Chinese culture. For example, Shanshan is a reference to Xiao Hao, or the Yellow Emperor, a significant figure in Chinese mythology who's viewed as the progenitor of Chinese culture, bringing innovations such as the Chinese calendar, boats, houses, and even Taoism to China. Heng is based on the god Chang'e, or Hengyi, the goddess of the moon. Shenong is based on the divine farmer, who in mythology is credited with creating the concept of agriculture in China. You come to care about the characters in a very intimate way. There is a moment in the game where Shanshan makes pottery using some red clay you find for him, and he makes a vase for Kwafu that looks like him. You can break it. There's an achievement for doing it. I'm never going to get all of the achievements for this game because I absolutely do not want to see his reaction to me breaking his artwork. I'm not a monster after all. By the end of the game, I was fully invested in this twisting and turning story. I was horrified by some of Yi's actions, particularly what he did to Gao Man. I was appalled by the way he spoke to Heng at times. Yet despite it all, he was actually a likeable character. I was always rooting for him. Giving Yi his own drive and motivation and flaws helps in a game like this. Even if at the start it's surface level revenge, seeing his growth from a single-minded killing machine to someone who's willing to sacrifice his own species so that the Apemen can live undisturbed and flourish with all the lessons that Shanshan has learned is deeply compelling. He's a genuine hero's journey. At the start of the game you can argue he's just as bad as the other souls. All he cares about is killing them, nothing else. As time goes on he softens. He learns to see events and ideas from other perspectives than his own. He grows as a character, and in that last cutscene I was crying almost as hard as Shanshan. The word is starting to get out on this game, but it's still desperately overlooked. Now that it's hit consoles, and at the time of writing it's available via a Game Pass subscription, I would encourage anyone and everyone who enjoys action games to give it a try. It's a game that now occupies a very special place in my heart, and a game that I won't forget anytime soon. Thank you for watching this ludicrously long video. When I set out to write this script I didn't expect it to come out this long. I wanted to do a story rundown of the game, but as I delved into it I realised I wanted to show everything I could. I didn't want to just summarise everything, I wanted to make the most complete account of this game's story as I could, because it deserves it. And even then I missed a few things, but hopefully this acts as a reasonably complete telling of the story of the game. I'm not sure I'll do a video this long again, it has been an ungodly amount of work, but 9 Souls was worth it. It was genuinely worth it. I've got a few videos in various states of production at the minute, so hopefully it won't be as long for the next one to come out, but I thank you for your patience with such a long gap between videos. If you want to keep up to date with what I'm doing, head over to my free Patreon where I post updates as to each video's progress, or follow me on Blue Sky, both of the links are in the description. If you're making videos and you want to use any of my 9 Souls footage, head over to my second channel, Gadget on Gaming Footage, where my entire 30 hours of playthrough is uploaded and free to download and use under Creative Commons. All you need to do is drop a credit in your work and you can monetize it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.